All right, I believe we're live. I can't watch at the same time, so you'll have to tell me, hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my forever and permanent co-host and best friend and wonderful human being. It's Tyler. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Good to be here. Good to see everybody. No Tom this week. Sorry, folks. I want him to be back as much, if not more than you do.
No, we all want him to be back. Believe I'm
Yeah.
sure Tyler is ready to pass the mantle, but sadly,
He's
uh,
here with me in spirit.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
Little Tom.
Sadly, yeah, he had to get back to his other responsibilities that is taking up his life, but he is getting there. We're progress is being made. So we'll see. He'll be back at some point. At any rate, we've got a fun show tonight talking about magic in AOS
Yeah.
3.0. It's some kind of magic. I'll say that for sure. But first, of course, the news.
The news. All right. Rumor engine. It's a 40K thing, it looks like.
It is.
For.
Somebody cracked the code on this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's like somebody put it together with the other boot, and it's like clearly a
Oh, yeah.
sci-fi boot. Like I
Hmm.
have it up on screen nonetheless. Like this matches up perfectly to a different rumor engine where it's the same boot and it's clearly like a 40K type of shoe.
Hmm.
So I don't know what's going on here with all these floating rocks,
Sure.
but there you go.
There you go.
It was
Much.
definitely like a 40K leg, unless we're getting like a complete redesign of the of Skaven or something like that. That would be the only thing.
Hmm.
But then they don't wear boots; they have little feetsies, or maybe a whole redesign of KO. I don't know. Something like that would be what it is, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I would tend to believe, like looking at the picture, it's a 40K thing.
Yeah. We had a couple of articles this week, or certainly since the last show. One focusing on Gobsprak with Cruel Boys, and then we got an article on dragons.
Yeah, I
So,
have some images from Gobsprak because that's in line. Both were about magic,
hmm,
which is they're really focusing on it. So let's talk about the two spells we saw in the article because this is both from the lore, right? These
hmm,
aren't specific to them. We already saw Gobsprak's spell, and it's pretty gross and disturbing, and going to be part of our conversation tonight. Like,
hmm,
these board wide awful effect spells, right? That just like have some ridiculous effect that just really controls the enemy army. These sort of global spells.
yeah,
But anyways, that's on his. I'm less. I have less of an issue with them when they exist on a specific character, as we'll talk about,
hmm,
than I do when they exist in a lore where they can be sort of freely taken. You know.
hmm, right,
But maybe I'm thinking about that backwards. We'll talk through it. But the lore of the swamp. So we got two spells from it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So the Black Pit,
hmm,
as you already said, pretty good through a spell portal.
yeah,
Pretty good.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. I mean, what did you think of the Black Pit?
Yeah, Catch Value 7. So if they're gonna have ways to get bonuses, which I would imagine they will. I mean, we already seen that he's got some ways to play around with unbinds. So a lot of these armies nowadays are getting bonuses to their casting.
Mm-hmm.
Range of 12, yeah. So probably portal and roll a dice for each model in the unit. For each 6, and for each other roll that is equal to or greater than that unit's save characteristic, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So obviously, we've probably talked more about the sort of durability meta, the stacking saves against red meta that we are fully in right now at the start of 3.0. This is amazing in that meta.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the actual just sort of what they're up against in the box set, right? Like, let's just take the
Mm,
basic comparison,
yeah.
which is they're up against Stormcast, right?
Hmm.
Namely, they're up against a bunch of Stormcast that all now are on 3 ups and 2 ups,
Yeah.
right? And that does quite a lot of mortal wounds to that unit. Now, we should state that like elite models are going to naturally be more resistant than single wound models,
Hmm.
right? You look at something like what are they, iron breakers or whatever,
Hmm.
in the dwarven infantry that people kind of like because they're like actually really cheap in cities and they have a 3 up base save, and
Yeah.
suddenly it's like, oh, but they're 1 wound dwarves,
Hmm.
right? So this just melts that unit from existence. Like 2/3 of that unit evaporates just straight out of the gate. 2/3
Yeah.
plus, realistically.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
So that's not fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly punishing to the high armor meta.
Mm.
A lot of people are relying on that single model with a 3-up save. That's actually where the action is in 3.0.
Sure. Yeah.
So like in my estimation, the important part of most lists is, I mean, outside of Night Haunt is a little bit of a different animal because of the nature of
Mm.
ethereal. But
Mm-hmm.
in most lists, you want to figure out how can I get a 3-up big hero in there. If
Mm-hmm.
they can be a monster, great, but they don't have to be. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked before on this show about how I'm a big fan of the Steam Tank Commander.
Yeah.
And yet again, that guy has proven his worth. I got a good test game in with him last weekend. When Tom
Mm.
was here, we actually got 7 games in,
Wow.
so that was pretty good.
Yeah, that's great.
I only did one with my test army. It was more me playing other armies against Tom, so he could get the full experience. I'll
Mm.
talk about it during hobby time. But at any rate, that dude continued to do work. He's very hard to remove, just because
Mm-hmm.
he can sit there and give himself tons of bonuses and ignore rend and basically be on a 3 or 2 up most of the time.
He doesn't have the monster keyword, does he?
He does not. Nope.
Okay, I wouldn't think he would. I thought there might be
Nope.
something janky going on. Okay.
Nope. It's just a guy in a tank. But
Yeah.
he's good in that army. He's bravery 8, which is pretty brave by city standards.
Yeah.
So like, this doesn't answer the single hero problem. Is my point,
Sure, that's a
right?
good
Like,
point. Yeah,
okay,
absolutely. Yeah.
now units that are on a 3-up, there's still not
Mm-hmm.
a ton of that around. Though
Yeah.
there are a lot of units on a 4-up, and this
On a
is
4.
still really good against them.
Yeah.
We would have called. I mean, previously the sort of cap of these horde breaker spells was
Mm.
on a 4+. Right?
Yep.
If you think about the old Gaunt Summoner and that thing that ruled, what was that, late
Mhm.
AOS 1.0, right? He was
Mhm.
just the horde breaker,
Yeah.
right?
We talked last week about whatever the name of that spell is that the corruptor does.
Yeah,
Pick a unit,
the
4
Great
up,
Plague, yeah, the dreaded
replay.
plague, yeah.
Yeah.
And both of those are on 4-ups, and those were just nightmares,
Mm.
right? Because they would just shred your unit down. In a
Yeah.
world where there's less hordes, I don't know if it's as valuable, but at the same time, God, if the meta does become sort of
Mm.
full of people with 3-up and 4-up base saves, larger units, then
Yeah.
holy crap, that's a good spell. It just
Yeah,
rattles
we
them.
right. Well, I talked about this about on like Big Shenanigans the other day. We were expecting there to be, the sort of the common wisdom was we're going to see a lot more MSU at the start of 3.0. And I
Sure.
think we have seen a little bit more, but I wouldn't say it's a lot more. Like,
Yeah.
in my opinion, we still see plenty. We certainly are seeing more of these strong individual hero monsters in particular.
Yeah.
But then, there's plenty of incentives that people are taking advantage of to run the 30 Sentinels, the 30 Iron
Yep.
Drakes, 60 zombies. There's a lot of it out
Uh-huh.
there right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I played through 7 different armies when I was playing Tom. I
Yeah.
tried to take him through the meta and show him kind of top lists and a bunch of different stuff. So I piloted an LRL list against him. I had 40
Mhm.
Sentinels, 2 units of 20, right?
Mhm.
I played a Soulblight Gravelord's army against him. I had 2 units of 60 zombies,
Mm.
right? So, I mean, and by the way, zombies are like basically immune to this spell.
Sure. Yep.
They're going to take, if you hit a full unit of 60, they take 10 mortal wounds, and then realistically, they probably get save 2 of them. So they take 8
Yeah.
wounds on zombies. It's like, oh no, what
Yeah.
will I do?
Yep.
My clan rats or whatever, because I ran a Skaven army too, of course, with the 60 clan rats. Again, same
Mm.
thing, 6-up save, don't care. Like, sure,
Mhm.
fine. I'll lose
Yeah.
I'll lose a couple clan rats. Woohoo!
But yeah, no, I think it'll have its place. The other one was Sneaky Miasma. Cast spell
Yeah.
at 6, range of 18. Pick one friendly Cruel Boys monster within range, visible to the caster. That monster can make a normal move. Hello, Mighty Destroyers.
Yeah,
4 Cruel Boys.
let me tell you why I like this, Tyler,
Yeah.
because this gives me hope that Mighty Destroyers is sticking around. My biggest fear, I did play Iron
Yeah.
Jaws one game over the weekend as well,
Yeah.
and spiked Archeon off the table like a football at the top of one, which was great. But one of my biggest fears is that we lose Mighty Destroyers. I really think it's such a
Mhm.
potent ability. The army's still playable without it. If we do lose it,
Mhm.
fine enough. Like, it's not the end of the world. But boy, does seeing this spell make me go, okay, I'll
Yeah.
probably keep it around. Like, let's do this.
Yeah.
because
Right.
it is just mighty destroyers with the limitation that now it has to be a monster, right? So which is fine. Most of what I'm moving with mighty destroyers is a monster anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not getting a lot of value of that 4-inch move on those brutes.
right. Sure, sure.
Or certainly piggies, but yeah.
And
All
for
right.
everybody
Anything
out there
else?
who's going to like suddenly
Yeah.
get pedantic on me, yes, I understand Mighty Destroyers is also used for a lot of other things beyond move, like fighting in the
Yeah.
hero phase and stuff. Of course, I understand
Yeah.
that. I'm just saying that this is the move part of it is often the valuable, the highly valuable tactic part for setting up what you need to do and actually giving the Iron Jaws the speed they need to compete. Anyways, please
Yeah.
continue. I just wanted to preempt the deluge of comments that was inevitably coming.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then we had the article on dragons. So
Yep.
a little bit more info. Let's see. So as many of us suspected, Krondys is going to be casting spells and getting bonuses to cast. So I think they said 2 cast on Krondys.
Yeah, he's a double caster, and they said he can get up to +3 to cast.
Hmm.
Okay. Like implying it's not a static bonus, but some kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, Tyler, what is the
Mm.
up to 3 mechanic on that dragon?
Hmm. Maybe. Well, it could be simply the damage profile table.
Okay.
We've
Okay.
certainly seen that before.
Sure.
Yeah. I think
Sure.
that comes to mind
Strong
as the
possibility.
lowest hanging fruit.
Hmm.
Yeah. What do you think?
At the start of the hero phase, roll a d3. This is the bonus that Krondys
Oh,
gets for the
yeah,
remainder of that hero phase. That's my
yeah,
guess.
I could see that. Yeah, that'd be nice and simple. Yeah, we've seen a little bit of this, but it's usually just a static bonus. It's like I don't know if we've seen any of the D3, certainly not D6 mechanics. I'm thinking like Croak, it's a static bonus
Hmm.
that I think is not affected by anything on Croak. Obviously, Nagash is affected by his profile, but yeah, no, that's good. It's a good guess.
Yeah.
So they talked about one of the so the set's going to get access to the lore of the storm, which I think was one of the spell lore names for Stormcast. I could be
Hmm.
wrong from the
Yep.
2018 book.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I hadn't looked back. And let's see, what do we got here? Talked about a blazing tempest missile attack that they're each going to get 18-inch range that can do anywhere from 1 to 6 mortal wounds. So just one attack, 18-inch range. So maybe they move like 14 inches, somewhere around there. Do not use the attack sequence. Instead, roll a dice 1 to 2. The target suffers 1 mortal wound on a 3 to 4, D3 on a 5 to 6, D6 mortals. So nothing too surprising.
Sure.
Yeah, but apparently they both have that. And then they did mention Krondys has a built-in spell, Atavistic Tempest. Gives him, looks like it's going to be a list of debuff options to enemy units.
Hmm.
They didn't really, like specify, is that going to be, can he get all of these at any given time, or do you have to pick one or the other or whatnot? But they mentioned, reducing hit rolls, attacks, rend, or save rolls. That could be quite good.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh, here
Somebody.
it is. I just saw, they did have the image of it here.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Somebody was said like sent me a note that they can hear a little whistle. Is there like a noise
Oh,
in there somehow? Like it's completely silent where I am. I don't hear anything
yeah,
at
I
all.
do. I do hear it now.
Okay.
I
Okay.
wonder if that's
Hmm. All right, here, we'll try something. Give me 2 seconds. We're going to bring
okay.
up
Cool.
this little thing.
So while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and mention, Atavistic Tempest is a spell that has casting value of 9 and a range of 24. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within range, invisible to the caster, then pick one of the effects below. And then, there's 4 options. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by that unit, or worse than the end characteristic of weapons used by that unit to by 1 to a minimum of dash. Subtract 1 from the attack characteristic of missile weapons used by that unit, again to a minimum 1, or subtract 1 from save rolls for attacks that target that unit. So all of those are amazing. Yeah,
Can
pretty
you still
good.
hear me okay? Am I still coming through all right there?
Yep.
All right. I switched to the my audio input. We'll see if that helps.
Cool.
Sorry, everyone. We can't, I don't hear anything, any whine, and he said, there we go. Okay, good. They texted me and said we fixed it. Yay.
Perfect.
Sorry, everybody. I can't see the comments, so I didn't know it was happening, and we don't hear anything, so There you go.
Gotcha.
Hopefully that's better. I'm sorry, everybody. Please continue.
Oh, yeah. So just going through that little spell that he's got there, going to be pretty impactful. We'd already gotten the preview of the Fires of Vengeance for Karzai the Scarred, so they were just repeating what we had already seen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in terms of he gets an effect each time
Yeah.
he
He
destroys an
kills
enemy
stuff.
unit. Yeah.
Their new favorite, like role playing game advancement mode
Right.
rule. You know, it's one of
Right.
those things where like they figured it out once with the Blood Knights, and then instantly they're like, oh, where else can we put this? So yeah.
Right. Guys, I'm gonna pull up the window to look at comments here. I don't know how you guys do this in terms of we always feel like I struggle to look at the comments. I'm amazed, Vince, that you can do this every time.
Well, I'm quite
Uh,
used to it. It's just I don't have a way to look at it because I only have one screen since I'm
all
in
right,
the hotel, and my phone won't find this particular thing. So that's
gotcha.
fun. That's
Okay,
fun.
I'll try to keep an eye on the comments, guys. So yeah, and then we got a little preview of Calamitous Tale. So they both have this. It is melee attack, so range 3. The attack value is dependent on how many models are within 3 inches of one of these dragons. So, you know, we've seen that a lot, but if there's 10 models within range, they get 10 attacks. 3's to hit, 3's to wound, -2 rend, 2 damage. Pretty good.
Yeah, need to see the whole picture. That's the answer.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's about it. They said, you know, the Sword Pass Battle Tome, they still haven't given us an exact date when we're going to see these Battle Tomes. They said it's almost with us. 76 War Scrolls. Good Lord. We're going to, you know, a couple years, we're going to be at 100. Battalions, battle plans, artifacts power, trait, spell lore. Still no explicit mention of battle tactics and grand strategies, so finger crossed.
Let's only hope. I mean, I really don't want it, Tyler. I really don't want it. There, I finally found the video over my phone, so I can look. If I look to the right, it's because I'm looking at comments.
Oh, good.
Okay. So sorry everyone for the noise. I didn't know it was happening. All right. Great. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in the dragons. I want to see the whole thing. That's what it comes down to. So.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and then we've got the U.S. Open Orlando is kicking off this weekend. So that's going to be, you know, in Florida, and hopefully they've got good. They're taking good steps in terms of everything going on in Florida right now.
Sure. Yeah, it's it's a rough state to choose. Yeah.
I don't know how many they are going to have. I would imagine, you know, over 60. I know there's been some drops, but I'm not sure. Do you know offhand how many they're expecting for AOS?
I don't know. I think originally it was 60. I imagine it'll be less.
Okay.
You know, especially given what's going on right now, as you mentioned, in Florida and in the U.S. in general.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, like, it'll be a good sized tournament.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how it comes out, but sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we got that. Flying Monkey, I'm going to go to that this weekend. Wichita, I think we're over 40, got around 44, I believe, for that one. Good mix. Actually, maybe a little bit later, I'll go into a little bit. I got a few stats on that one I thought might be interesting for some folks. Summer Slaughter, I saw Marty say today he's going to go to that one in Pennsylvania. I think that'll be a pretty good turnout for that one too. And then Old Town Throwdown in Southern California is happening. I don't think Scott Reed is organizing this one. I think maybe it's some friends of Scott is doing it. But yeah, there might be some other events going on, but I saw those are happening in the U.S. this weekend. So yeah, should get some interesting results.
I agree. I'm very interested to see how, you know, the events have been shaping up. Actually, I think with a pretty wide meta.
Yeah.
Right. That's actually really nice. You're seeing a lot of different people at the top. You know, we're seeing a lot of 1 days and 2 days over in the UK, here in the US, over in Australia, New Zealand. And, you know, yes, of course, some of the old favorites are there. Like you're still seeing Tzeentch Archeon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other things that are also coming to the top of the list. So, yeah, I mean, it's ultimately I'm excited for what comes out of it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, real quickly on that, maybe curious your do a pulse check on where you are with overall right now, like the elevator version. I think for me, it's not yet at sort of the best of times, worst of times, but it's very intriguing. like thinking about the over the 6 years, I do find the meta we're in, it's early, quite intriguing because we do appear to have in the aggregate great diversity, particularly historically, I would say, in the results that we're seeing, sort of diversity of list builds and in the top tens, what's being viable. And then also we do have a number of clear, I think, pretty clearly identifiable problems that need to get cleaned up. And there's some that we need. It's depending on perspective, it's TBD or it's determined. Like there's a lot of concern about the
Sure.
stacking against saves
Sure.
and what that's doing right now.
I mean, if you let's not even take the heavy
Sorry,
hand here of stacking
stacking
against
against Ren.
saves. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
stacking
know.
against Ren.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of the stacking saves to
yeah.
counter rend. Let's just take the most minor change here, Tyler. Okay,
Mm,
let's move Marathi up. Call it. Let's be conservative. 40 points. Make her
mm,
an even 700. Okay. Let's move Gotrek up to an even 500, and let's take Archeon and put him at 1,000 even.
mm,
Okay.
mm-hmm.
I think that alone has some pretty big impacts on the meta, right?
Mm,
And by the way, that like Archeon is the big offender. He's the one who's skewing everything,
mm-hmm.
right? Because of what he does when he gets put in Zinch or Corn or Slaves or whatever. Like he's just this giant problem,
Mm,
and like I mean, he's just ridiculous.
yeah.
So he's the one who needs the most egregious fix. The other ones I could be a little more conservative on. I mean, Gotrek is truly awful to play against sometimes. You
Uh,
know, people are like, "Oh, just walk away from him." Just walk away from Gotrek is the new shoot the heroes. Okay,
yeah.
like I'd love to, but he happens to be where I need to go to win the game, and if
Yeah.
I go over there, I'm dead.
I know, yeah, we've had some continuing conversation about these three and Nagash and so on, and the
Mm-hmm.
community in general has. And, I think there's a lot of varied perspective, I would say, on Gotrek. I think I tend to see him as the most contentious and sort of least coherent of perspectives. And in my opinion, there are a number of ways to mitigate him. Buckets of
Sure.
dice is obviously the first one. Another one is your opponent, which is what happened to me on Tuesday. My opponent couldn't make a 3-up save to save his life. And I got roar off every time against Gotrek. He wasn't in Hunters of the Heartland, which of course you can do right now. And that maybe that was arguably a list building mistake that he made. He probably should have been in Hunters.
He should
But
always be in Hunters.
yeah.
If he's in the list, he should just be in Hunters because then he's almost
Yeah.
impossible to stop because he
Yeah.
can always all out defense himself.
Yeah, but my opponent, yeah, he rolled a lot of ones and twos, and then it just in terms of the regular saves, I was obviously
Sure.
getting some Ren, but then especially on the ward, the 3-up ward, and yeah, so but yeah.
Yeah, I mean the buckets of dice thing. All right, so
Mm,
over the weekend I fought him twice. At one point in time, I attacked him with. I got 77 attacks off with clan rats on him, and
mm,
over the course of like, let's say a combat and a half or whatever.
mm-hmm,
Through like this was a unit of clan rats that had completely surrounded him, had the full reach, had their max +1 to hit and wound bonus on him. Right, so they were on 3s and 3s.
mm.
Had +1 attack, had death frenzy, had a 6-up ward save. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did 2 wounds to him.
Yeah, that's wild.
Okay.
So was he rolling quite a bit above average on saves, or I don't know if you were.
I
had
don't
a
know what
sense
the
of that.
math is, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I didn't calc it out. I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure I could calc that out and tell you what the answer was.
Sure.
Yes, Gotrek was in Hunter, of course, every time, right?
Yeah.
I also attacked him with a big horde of zombies who mortal
Mm.
on 6s. Now I didn't have curse on Gotrek in the clan rat situation because I couldn't. He was sort of outside 9 and then he came in, right?
Yeah.
And but I went in with zombies who do mortal wounds on the 6s.
Mm.
I attacked him with a horde of zombies, also with the +1 attack,
Mm.
right? And did not have vent held because magic is stupid, as we'll talk about. No, like I did 1 wound to him,
Mm.
attacking him with 22, 23, whatever the maximum number is you can fit around him. Like I had literally
Mm.
him double ringed, completely surrounded.
Yeah.
Right? Like there was
Yeah.
not a millimeter of open space where I could have had one more model.
Sure.
And yeah, he took 1 wound. And then he turned around and killed the entire zombie unit.
Yeah, I do find that a little surprising, but yeah, I mean, fair enough. It can happen.
He also
Yeah.
chopped his way through my entire army of sons. He just went like one giant, one mega, three babies, 3 rounds in a row. Boom, boom, boom. Just
Wow.
right through the whole thing.
Right.
And it was on the Vice. Like, where else am I supposed to
Mm,
go? There's a
sure.
place I've got to be. I don't know what to
Yeah,
tell you.
absolutely. Right.
I can't run away
Anyway,
from him.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, let's get back to it. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to, a couple of comments that we've had come through. So it looks like 38. Yeah, Charles Fox is TOing this weekend. Look forward to seeing you, Charles, at the event. And then looks like we're over 50 for Old Town Throwdown, which is awesome. 54 players so far. That's great. Yeah, pretty good numbers.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, Flying Monkey, thought folks might find this interesting. So, grand strategies. So the list went up in the Best Coast Pairings app. I think they went up today. We've got 10 prize sorcery. So that's
Okay.
one, of course, keep a wizard alive.
Yep.
We've got 17 hold the line, keep a battle line alive.
Sure.
6 Beastmaster, 2 of which were Archeon.
Sure.
And 3 dominating presence. Dominating presence, I was going to look. Was that the one where you need to have
That's
more units?
it's the territory control.
The territory control.
The
Okay, that's
terrain control. I'm sorry. Terrain control.
terrain control. Okay, yeah. I thought it was the more units. I forgot to check before the show. Okay, yeah, we had 3 of those, 2 of which were IDK, and 1 was the Phoenician list. So I
Okay.
could kind of see that with some IDK.
Sure. Yeah. Zip around.
Yeah.
Grab the terrain. Yeah.
But yeah, those were the 4.
All right. What
Grand
else we got for
strategies.
news?
Let's see. What else we got? Oh, comp. We wanted to mention that a little bit.
Yeah. So
So
yeah. Go ahead.
we had Facehammer, Russ Veal, Byron, and company, who are organizing Facehammer tournament, which I can't recall. I know it's coming up really soon. They put out their pack this week, and it's been the kind of tough du jour in the community over the week. We wanted to mention it. I don't know, Vince, how much detail you want to go into it. We talked a couple of days ago in our prep call that we'd like to do an in-depth show on this topic, really, give it the justice that it deserves over a couple of hours. But anything in particular you want to go over with it?
It's interesting. It's interesting to see them in particular making that
Yeah.
move to move beyond just sort of answering FAQ questions that aren't out yet. Speaking of which, where's the FAQ? We're going to
Yeah.
need to send Rob, Honest Wargamer Rob, back out in front of the place with his sign again.
Yeah.
But they actually took a hand at balancing stuff, which I wasn't expecting, to be honest. So that was surprising. It's something I want to think deeply about and present a whole show on.
Yeah.
Not respond to in the news. It's worthy of a deep dive.
Yeah. 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 I'm really glad for the conversation that it's kicked off. I mean,
Yep.
I think, it's messy, but on the whole, I think it's a net positive for those conversations to happen.
Sure.
So yeah, cool. I think that's it, dude, for news.
Oh, very good. I have one more final news thing, which is not only am I traveling today, but I know my wife was watching, and I want to say happy birthday to her, and you should all wish her a happy birthday. It's her birthday today, and I'm not there for it. This is, of course, the first time I've had to travel in a year and a half, and it's on her birthday. And today was truly the worst day of travel I have had in many, 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 many years. So yeah. Anyways,
happy birthday, Kathy.
Yes, happy birthday, sweetheart. All right. So, anyways, let's talk about some pick of the week, man. What do you got?
Yeah, Coach is back with his Talking series. So starting off the 3.0 series on Soul Black Gravelords with Matt Terrell. Good show. Yeah. We did a show on SBG. We talked about how I thought that they might be, they were probably oriented for 3.0 and that they might be underrated in terms of looking at them through the 2.0 lens that we were at the time.
Yeah.
And definitely early results. Yeah, they're doing quite well. So yeah, I thought that
was a great show. Coach, as usual, doing a fantastic job. Matt was fantastic on there. So yeah, I would recommend go check it out. It's linked down in the comments, so you can go check that out.
Last one, got to do a shout out to Melnick and Dan with Cubic Shenanigans. They had me on for the final part 3. They've been doing this in-depth dive on 3.0, all things 3.0 over the last 3 episodes. So we just finished that off, kind of looking at GHB 21, spells, battle tactics, grand strategies, overall thoughts on the state of the game right now, good things, concerns. Yeah, it's a good discussion over a few hours.
Awesome. Also linked down below.
Mhm.
My pick is pretty simple. If you do want to see a discussion on comp right now, Honest Wargamer Rob over on his channel had his daily. It's him and Nathan talking about comp. I don't agree with all of his thoughts, but that's okay. There is room in the world for people of good intention to disagree. But it was an interesting discussion nonetheless. I generally like Nathan's point of view on a lot of things, and yeah, they kind of talk through the comp situation and what that looks like, and yeah, it's a good discussion. That's what I'll say. So there you go.
Nice. Very cool. Thanks for Axios in the comments. Average for 77 Spirit Clan Rat attacks on max buff Go Trick is 2.8 damage.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely not an edge case. Thanks for Axios.
I'm glad that I was within the statistical average.
Yep. All right.
Cool, man. Let's talk about some hobby time.
Yeah.
What have you? Did you get some games in?
I did, yeah. I hadn't yet played Power Numbers, which we also had a discussion about the other night.
Hate it.
Yeah, you guys, you got a very clear opinion on it right now. Yeah, it's going to be one of the ones for Flying Monkey, and it was the one that I hadn't played yet and had the most concern around. Daughters of Cain, I'm running 3x10 Witch Elves and 10 Snake Bows, so fairly squishy in terms of battle line. Yeah, we played Luminethalist, not the hardest Luminethalist. I think that he had 2x10 Sentinels, 20 Wardens, Go Trick, Cathalar. What else did he have? Some other heroes, Lord Regent. Nothing, you didn't have a lot of Sentinels. Oh, 10 Dawn Riders. But yeah, it was interesting. I think I could see my list struggling on that one in certain matchups, particularly if I just get shut off early. All the battle line just gets shut off early. But yeah, I can appreciate your perspective on Power Numbers. I'm not really sure what my ultimate opinion on it is. I do still think it's intriguing on the surface, at least with regard to the battle line requirement and the effect that, because certainly it changed my list with Flying Monkey. I had Shadow Stalkers in my list, and I took those out because I felt I needed at least another battle line.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it definitely will shape list construction. It's
Yeah.
just so much to think about, calculate, plan for, and handing OBSEC to these very particular units. Like, not all armies' battle line is created equal, right? And so it's just interesting how you might be playing an army where your battle line kind of sucks, and you have 10 or 20 bodies on a point, but then one battle line dude gets near it and it's like, no, this is mine now. My one makes your 20 0, right?
Yeah.
I instantly take it from you and I instantly burn it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the challenge with it, because it's the combination in my mind of that ability, the OBSEC, combined with a burn points scenario where you can't afford to lose a thing for a round. Right,
Yeah.
if it was like a normal escalating back and forth one,
Kind of
more
like
than
Throw
one,
Foray, maybe where you can only do a max of one burn.
right, or even if it was just a normal scenario where you're taking it, you got one, you got two, you kind of trade back and forth. Maybe the only time you get rid of one is from the seismic shift. I would be a lot less problematic with it, right? The problem is you can burn any number of objectives in the round. So like, one wrong misstep, you can be calking everything, and then some people just have really super duper fast, tricksy, teleporty, whatever battle line. They tow one battle line guy in when you don't have one around. Your objective's gone, and they burnt it, and you lose the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, that's it.
Yeah,
it's just over that fast.
Yeah, I mean, one of those situations could be like we talked about. I think drops are still having a meaningful impact on the game.
Oh yeah.
And that was one thing I was tracking with Flying Monkey list, and there's still quite a few 1-drops, quite a few 2-drops. But yeah, in that mission where you have a 1-drop, you outdrop your opponent, you give them top of 1, you go bottom of 1, you get the double. You go twice, and I mean, in some matchups, the game, you might be able to do enough work in terms of burning, particularly if you then get the choice to burn at the bottom of 3. And I definitely found that to be quite impactful on Power Numbers. Yeah, that choice.
It's super impactful. Yeah. The combination of that with the ability to snake just makes it almost impossible to like play and feel like you've got a good handle on what's going on. Yeah. That's the challenge.
I had to do a little trick, like with because he had 10 Dawn Riders bearing down. If he had, because he was able. I had to go first in that game because the lore seeker was there,
Mhm.
which is often a good. If anybody doesn't know, like that's one good use of a lore seeker is essentially force your opponent to go one
Sure.
because of the potential impact that it could have if that doesn't happen. Because he could have wiped out a battle line unit probably with a lore seeker, and I wasn't considering that my deployment. But anyway, yeah, I had to put the Shadow Queen, move 10 Witch Elves on my far right next to the Shadow Queen, so that if he did come in to try to blow up those Witch Elves, he would at least be potentially in combat with the Shadow Queen. Now, of course, I mean, he could have potentially shot a few of them, but anyway, there's like little weird things that you may have to consider
Yeah,
with that one.
this may behoove an entire second show
Yeah,
on the scenarios, right? Like a look back.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, definitely. But yeah,
For myself, I finished up the big project I was working on, so very happy about that. Can't talk about it too much, but I didn't get a chance to hobby any more than that before I left. But I got that giant project done. There will be a video coming to the channel on it in the future weeks, so look out for that. It'll be fun once I'm able to share that out. I think people are really going to enjoy the video and the project as a whole. When I get back, a box showed up from Martin Orlando for the Rantathon charity, so now I've got to paint a Lumineth thing. But that's fine. Someday I'll paint my Ratcast. I'm going to get to him eventually. It's going to happen. For me, like I said, Tom was also visiting last week. I did still manage to get a lot done when he was there, but playing 7 games of Warhammer did chew into my hobby time just a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was a lot of fun. I got to pilot Skaven, Suns, LRL, SBG, Iron Jaws, my City's Tempest Eye, and then Tom played another one of our club mates. So that was the games. I think that all sounds
Nice.
right. Yeah,
Cool.
it's fun times.
Did you have any overall impressions of Tom?
Oh, it was an emotional roller coaster.
That's fair.
It was up and down. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, you get some more games in and get accustomed to it.
Indeed,
Yeah.
he's gonna get his feet put in the fire next week. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, good stuff.
All right, so Tyler, you want to talk about magic?
Yeah, man. I'm
Let's
excited
talk
for
about
this one.
magic.
Yeah.
I apologize, everyone. I don't have like a fun presentation today. I had really intended to, and then I spent 6.5 hours sitting on a tarmac stuck in a plane that was just going nowhere. So that was a real fun day I had. So my apologies. So we're just going to use this little image here as we talk about it. Yeah, Tyler, where I wanted to start out, right, was Magic in 3.0 at a high level, the 40,000 foot view. How impactful do you think Magic is in this edition overall?
Yeah. I mean, short answer, quite impactful. Like, to put a number on it, 7 out of 10, I feel very confident in terms of like a scale.
Okay.
You, in particular, because we have, you look at some of the top armies, they are orienting around magic. Cogs is usually there. It is the most out of bounds endless spell right now relative to its point cost.
Yep.
I feel pretty comfortable saying, 45 points. Tzeentch and Lumineth are at the top of that list. Lumineth got hit a little bit with Twin Stones. I haven't been seeing Twin Stones show up in any list actually, but Cogs is still quite impactful with Lumineth.
Yeah, it's funny because I used Cogs and the Twin Stones in the Lumineth list I ran, and all I was doing was using the Twin Stones to juice up and then power out Total Eclipse.
Yeah, which seems like a reasonable use for it to me, but I can't recall offhand the point value of it. I have to look it up. But yeah.
It's still relatively cheap. I want to say it was 55 points, I think, off the top of my head. I don't.
Okay. Yeah,
again, I'm not a normal Lumineth player, but I play against them, so I was able to, I know what I'm fighting normally. And I mean, it was, you set up Cogs, suddenly you just put it in the middle of all the units and your wizards, and suddenly everyone's a double caster. The Twin Stones gets juiced up to 1,000,000, right? And then your last spell is you power out Total Eclipse quite easily with like a +5 or 6 to cast.
Yeah, and it's definitely still quite impactful. I felt it last night, actually. Yeah, Total Eclipse. Yeah, so we all know about Tzeentch. I mean, it is still extremely strong, and it's not just Archeon and Kairos. We've seen already some lists without Archeon that are doing incredibly well, and generally oriented around leaning into cogs to get a ton of fate points to really supercharge their summoning, and then of course pink horrors. But yeah, Seraphon, I'm not sure how much we're seeing in terms of leaning into magic with Seraphon. Sylvaneth is back up there. But yeah, Skaven certainly. So yeah, I think overall it's having quite an impact, at least in terms of the top in the meta in general.
Yeah, my honest answer is I think it's an inverted bell curve right now, Tyler.
Mm.
That's my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I think all of Magic right now is very bifurcated into two categories.
Mm.
I don't give a crap if you cast it and it doesn't matter very much, or it's super impactful and it's part of your strat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've always, like, there's a saying at our table that magic is dumb. Okay. Like we all the time in our weekend games, because you'll watch somebody, like, when you're a normal army, like, that casts normal spells and doesn't have a bajillion bonuses, right? Then we've all had this experience where it's like, cast on a 6, failed. All right, this next spell cast on a 5, failed. All right, this next spell cast on a 7,
Sure.
failed. Okay, my magic phase is, my hero phase is over, right?
Right.
Like, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And magic, because the nature of how it's on 2d6 against these progressively higher numbers, every number you move it up, 5, 6, 7, 8, it actually gets way less reliable. Right? Like that 1 point, that 1 tick is having huge statistical impacts on your likelihood to achieve it, right? Assuming you're not packing rerolls, bonuses, etc. Right?
Playing Daughters of Camelot, the Mind Racer change is, I think, a great example of that, where it should be an 8 to cast with how strong it is, but it used to be a 7, and just that 1 tick makes an enormous difference with that spell and how likely it is you're going to get it off or not. I played so many games where I can never get that darn spell off, even with the +1.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, and I would include people who maybe are just running around with like a +1, although a +1 does make a big mathematical impact, right? Like, it's crazy how much it moves the numbers around. But anyways, I mean, we're talking like seismic shifts here in efficacy off of +1, +2. 16, 20, 25% increases in your average chance to succeed, right? Depending on where you are. So the nature of the thing is that, I watch a lot of spells and I'm like, okay, you're going to give me neg1 to hit. That's a spell, right? There's a lot of spells that are like neg1 to hit, or something like that, or neg1 to wound, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'd rather dispel that. It's not that it's not impactful. It's just that it feels the right amount of impactful. Like, I have play against that. You know what I mean? Like, okay, that unit got -1 to hit. Now I know I need to use a command ability on it, or buff it in some other way to counteract that, or just deal with the understanding that it's less valuable, right? Or like, okay, a D3 mortal wounds and I have my move, or I have my, or I don't get to run, or something like that. There's a whole host of spells like that, right? Like D3 mortals and some kind of right or penalty, right?
Yeah.
Often to movement or save or whatever. Fine. Again, those feel like spells, right? Like, they're there. They have an impact to the game. I'm not saying they're not impactful, right? I'm just saying, like, okay, I can work around it, or I understand, like, it has counterplay. And then there's this host of spells that are just like in a completely different league. They just don't look like the other spells. And they're usually on the same casting numbers, right? They'll be on 6s and 7s, but they'll just have like wildly more powerful effects, right? And these are the spells that end up getting, when they start to cluster together. So, like, if you take Tzeentch when you're playing with, a bird and all the appropriate casters, and, like, okay, the blue scribes fires off and now everyone's got rerolls and the bird is going to set up a portal, then Cogs comes out. It's like, okay. And then the portal comes out and it's like, okay. And then, we all know where this is going, right?
Right. Portal. Should we have the spell portal in the game or not?
Oh, let's talk about that with endless spells.
Okay.
Spoiler, no. No, obviously not. um, the the nature of the thing. And it's like, okay, well, some unit is going to get something melted, or a hero is going to melt, right? Because what's coming next is 6 mortal wounds happening almost automatically to a
Hmm.
model. I'm going to have nothing to say about that because they could be literally outside of my dispel range, casting it through the portal, right?
Yeah.
They're going to melt a
It,
hero and make a
mm,
chaos spawn.
it's even more challenging now because with, well, I suppose with Spell Portal you could have still done this, but in terms of someone has, say, a change caster front
Uh-huh.
line behind a screen,
Right.
Kairos in the back, you know where I'm going. You have the change caster put up the spell portal. One end goes within 1 inch of Kairos, the other one goes 18 inches from that, nearly or on the line change caster. So really, and then with the shorter board that we're playing in, it can be incredibly difficult to zone out, to hide from the 6 mortal wound ball that's coming your way. And yeah, I found that in some of these 3.0 games already. It was hard enough in 2.0, but it's even worse now.
Yeah, and so that's what I mean when I say like it has this inverse bell curve, right? Like
Yeah,
a lot of magic sits down here in the like fine, it's interesting, it's doing something, and
right.
it's it's there, it like exists. And then up here, right on this side, there's all these spells. There's a bunch of trash spells over here that no one ever casts, and it's just like I don't
Sure.
even know why they got written, right? See like the lore of the vampires if you want in SBG for a great example
Mm-hmm.
of like 5 truly terrible spells, or basically any lore in Slanesh that isn't a heal, any spell in Slanesh that isn't a healing spell, which even then is like
Mm,
that's the best we get.
yeah.
Um, so
Or
it's
or they're too short range to be sufficiently
yeah,
meaningful. Yeah,
sure,
there's a lot of that in Slenish book. Yeah.
yeah, sure. It's like, oh, what is that range? 3 inches? Don't spoil me.
Uh-huh.
Um, but whereas again, you watch the Magic armies. I've played against the sort of Host Arcanum Zinj army lots of
Mm,
times, and the current caster version of that. And there's a couple different builds, right? But they all use
mm,
cogs, and they all set up a castle, and they end up building without you casting any spells at all.
mm.
They all do something like 10 to 14 fate points every turn.
Yeah, I was estimating it out today because I was curious. We have at least one Host Arcanum list showing up this weekend, and it's the Archeon, Kairos, Blue Scribe, Sork Lord, Changecaster, plus Cogs. And yeah, it seemed like they could, if they're all around there, yeah, around 13 spells is what I was estimating,
Right.
which is just nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts because it's a unit of blues every time. I mean, it's 100
Yeah.
extra wounds over the course of the game.
Yeah, and
Right.
I mean, I don't know if folks, if you haven't like sat down and looked at a list, particularly this Archeon Kairos, but even without Archeon, in terms of the number of spells and what these spells are doing, it's pretty scary. I mean, the one thing with Tzeentch that always been the saving grace is that generally they operate within the 18-inch kill box.
Right.
And so that was how I would always try to play around Tzeentch. And I do think there's still some of that you can do. It certainly gets a lot more difficult when you have an unkillable, very killy model that's in your face, destroying your army that you can't run away from. So, but yeah, it's really interesting. Like sit down and go through in detail all what it will mean in a game when you're getting hit with these 13 spells
Right.
and how much is going on. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yep. It ends up being quite a lot of like damage, exactly as you said, if you get into the mid range with them,
Yeah,
right? Like if it flips to their turn and they activate and you got a bunch of stuff close, the heat is on. It's on the
yeah.
streets, right?
the one I
Because the
the
mortal
one I
wounds are going
found
to come. Go ahead.
Yeah. The one I found surprising that they haven't fixed, that personally I think does need to get fixed because we are removing reroll saves, as far as I know, throughout the game for the most part. We still have a few examples. Shield of Fate is one. So as far as I know, Shield of Fate, you can still get reroll saves as long as I think you have to have four or more dice in your Destiny dice pool. And then I think if you have seven or more, you also get the added bonus of a 4-up to ignore spells and endless spells, which you can stack on Archeon, who has an innate 4-up. So in Tzeentch, as far as I can tell, Archeon can only get he can reroll saves. He can easily get potentially reroll hits and wounds. He can get +1 to hit and wound from a Tzeentch spell. Like it's probably even worse than what he can do in Corn with a double activation. I didn't know that the Shield of Fate does real saves. I didn't realize that
Yep.
was still out there.
Oh,
Yeah.
it sure does.
So he can get to like a +4 save. It yeah. Anyway, it's re-rolling. It's bonkers.
one of the funnest moments from all the games we played when Tom was here was there was a moment where when my other clubmate and Tom played each other, Tom was
Yeah.
playing Gotrek and the Zinch player was playing Host Arcanum Archeon, and he slingshotted Archeon into the lines of the KO player round one with Gotrek. And then Gotrek came into him bottom of one, and they fought the rest of the game. Neither of them died.
Yeah.
They just sat there and
Wow.
fought. And they would do wounds to each other and then heal wounds and do wounds. Now, Archeon was coming out the loser because he had drifted out of buff range. Archeon had to eventually retreat, go back into buff range, get rebuffed, and then get back in the fight. But I mean, Archeon was still probably going to lose that in the end. But yeah, they just fight forever. It's just nobody kills each other. They just sit there and like just 5 rounds just swinging at each other.
Yeah.
Anyways, I mean, so that's why I say, to me, I think Magic for most of the game, and Zinch is always a tough one because that is their thing,
Sure.
right? Like it's supposed to be their thing.
Yeah.
And I think if they didn't have Archeon and if Pink Horrors weren't like the nightmare that they are,
Yeah.
I would be like, yeah, okay, cool. Like they're devastating in the Magic phase because that's their phase, right? That's what they
100%.
own,
Yeah.
and that's what they do.
Maybe make cogs a little more expensive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, we'll talk about endless spells in a moment,
Yeah.
but you know, like Zinch, generally when you get leveled by Magic against Zinch, I'm like, okay,
Sure.
you know, that seems fair because again, pushing Archeon to the side for a moment, who shouldn't be as cheap and effective in there as he is, right? We've already identified that that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, what are you afraid of in the combat phase against Zinch, right? Or in the shooting phase? Like their flamers now are so expensive, it's actually very risky to take them. Like flamers are properly pointed now, by the way. I'll die on that hill. Because they're actually glass cannons now, and they're fragile for their points.
I mean, you probably have seen from what they're certainly not showing up in lists right now, but I mean, it's understandable why they're not when you've got Archeon, Pinks, and etc. that are on the table. But yeah,
sure. But like, you know, and by the way, it's not that like 30 Pinks tossing fire at you is gonna do 0. It does stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But those aren't their phases, so I'm okay with it. The spells I take issue with, and I think this is something we'll discuss later when we talk about like what should be there, what shouldn't be there. But the spells I take issue with are what I'll call the global spells, right? Things that are affecting huge swaths, maybe the entire battlefield, and putting up just like a massive amount of impact to the game off of one spell, right? Total Eclipse is the classic version of this.
Sure.
Where it's just like this, it's just a spell that shouldn't exist. I don't know why it exists. It's counterspell for 2 mana, right? It's just doing too much for 2 cheap. And like, yeah, I understand they cast on an 8. Okay. They have like a million ways to achieve that automatically, right? Be it Techless or a Contemplate or the Twin Stones or right? You know, roll a 7 and burn a penny, you know, burn some of their gold. Like there's just options. So, yeah, I mean, like that's, and the new Swamp Kala or the new, what's his name, Gobsmack or whatever, who can do the like board wide, everybody gets, you know, the enemy is -1 to run and charge, and their whole army's +1 to run and charge.
Yeah.
You know, it's a similar vein. That one's clearly not on the same level as Total Eclipse. Let me be 100% clear.
Sure.
But it's impactful, you know, and I'm just not sure we should be doing like that much with Magic.
So you think,
With
so
a
yeah, we
single
have
spell.
this, right. So you think so basically what I'm hearing you saying is that we need to more operate in a fat middle for Magic than what we have right now. We have maybe quite a few examples that are too irrelevant, and then too many examples that are too outside the bounds. Certainly you're saying the latter. Are you saying the former as well, that there's too much that's just somewhat irrelevant?
Yeah,
or
100%. Yeah, there's just too many spells that are on the bad side of this too. I mean, we're not even talking about them. If we listed those, we'd be here all week.
Right.
Because there's a bunch of them on War Scrolls. There's a bunch of them in spell lores. Literally, we just read over and go, no sane human being would ever cast this.
Yeah.
Right, because it has zero purpose. Like, who wrote this? right?
Mm.
And AOS List Labs in the comments, Smorgan was saying like magic missiles and things like that Zinch cast that just go on nothing. Because if you've ever played a Zinch player, that's what they do. They just cast at nothing the first round. Like
Sure.
stuff goes off into the ether, right?
Yeah.
And when I see that happening, I'm like, why is that giving you fate points? You're casting out of unbind range at nothing, affecting nothing, doing nothing, and yet you're
Right.
building your resource. Like, I don't. No other army that builds those resources gets to just not actually interact and do
Yeah.
their thing, but still do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let me give you the example that I think would be close. Ready? It'd be like if Korn could just like be like, all right, well, I'm not, because units have to die, right?
Right.
It'd be like if they were just, okay, well, it's the combat phase. I'm not actually in combat with anyone, but all my units fight. I get two blood points.
Sure.
You didn't fight anything. Yeah, didn't I?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, that seems fair.
So, like one of the challenges with those big spells, like Total Eclipse and stuff like that, is that the framework, the architecture, the engine that we have to cast spells isn't very versatile. Okay? Like, it's 2d6 against a set number, and then there's some effect. Yeah. That's it. Right? You can have bonuses, you can have rerolls, but it's quite a static architecture, right? So the fact that I am putting both a spell that can do just D3 mortal wounds, maybe, like that's a pretty good spell, right?
Yeah.
The fact that I have to contain both that and all command points until my next hero phase are doubled, or whatever, pick your giant effect, right? That is sort of a big board sweeper thing. The fact that I have to contain both of those on the same architecture doesn't really work, right? Because there's not enough ways to create the viability of risk reward to contain those two mechanics, right? Like if Total Eclipse was like, oh, and if they fail, they take D6 mortal wounds, or they can only if they succeed, they can't do it again this game.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you have to sort of play outside the box to create these additional risk reward mechanics,
right?
Because the foundational element is so simple.
Yeah. Well, like take more war power. I mean, I would doubt that book was written with the thought that we could have 9 Storm Fiends, which I know we've talked a lot about. Well, say 6 Storm Fiends. What do you want to take? At one point in the game in 2.0, we had 9 Storm Fiends, and then that was removed, and that was healthy, I would say, for the ecosystem. Now we're back to it. But however many you want to take, I doubt that was. That was in mind with the output of that unit, rerolling hits and wounds. Now, with Skaven, I know that there can be some blowback. I don't know.
Yeah, you take a D3 mortals on the unit.
Like if the probability of that is high enough, particularly relative to D3 isn't that bad. But that to me stands out. As on a unit like Storm Fiends in particular, that has an enormous impact.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I do think Storm Fiends should be capped at 6, by the way. I stand behind that. I mean, I've said before how I think the 9 list is actually a weaker list, and I also stand behind that. It's not going to be the 5-0 tournament winner. That doesn't mean it's not a bad time had by all, right?
Right.
You can be
80-20.
Yeah, you can be a non-tournament winner and NPE. Those two things they're not one and the same, right?
Yeah.
And like when you look at more war power, you think about it on something like Giselles. Okay. All right. So let's say 6 Giselles. Standard single reinforced Giselle unit. Well, they're 2 wound rats, right? That whole unit has like 12 wounds.
Yeah.
And so like D3 mortals is actually pretty impactful. You can lose a whole gun.
Yeah.
And but like clearly it feels more in balance. I don't think anybody complains about more war power on Giselles.
Sure.
Right? If it's like okay. Or if you throw more war power on like a Doom wheel, it's like, all right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, cool, man.
Right.
Like, have fun,
Right.
Because it's an 8 wound thing. But when it goes onto Storm Fiends that are so big, have 6, 7 wounds,
Yeah.
and can just absorb that penalty realistically 3 rounds in a row without potentially losing a guy. Like that's a possible world to live in,
Mm.
you know? If you just average out and you put it on the 7 wound dude,
Mm.
that's where it gets problematic, right? You're not paying the cost anymore that's
Right.
there. Now, I will say a lot of Skaven stuff is like that. There's actually quite a lot of Skaven stuff that has a kickback cost to it, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you get this bonus to attack or to hit or to whatever, but you suffer mortal wounds.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Skaven are the most fair army. I stand behind that from our Skaven show because they're the ones who are actually paying the cost. Most people just get this stuff,
Sure. Right.
right? They usually have some kind of kickback of mortal wounds or
Yeah.
some kind of cost like that,
Of
right?
course,
Or
it's probably a good
some
time
risk.
to say that was a good addition to the game. I think having miscast come back, where I've certainly done that. I've yet to do it with playing in a gash, but with Marathi, 3 spells, first spell, there you go, double ones, she's done, and that's impactful. So I do like that we do have that at least coming back, and so maybe what you're saying is, we should lean into that a little bit more in some of these cases, kind of as a general notion, particularly with some of these powerful spells.
Yeah, like what you'd want with these powerful spells is the ability to when I say the architecture is poor, what I mean
Mm.
is every spell costs one spell. You know what I'm saying? When you cast it, it's
Mm-hmm.
one cast. When you
Right.
select it, it's one selection, right? It's
Mm.
all the same resource. They're all balanced completely equivalently against each other. And
Mm.
because of the weird nature of scaling 2d6, right? You can't just take the big spell and put it on like a 10
Mm.
because then it becomes almost statistically impossible if you don't have huge bonuses,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then you're rolling at like a very slim percentage and you don't try to cast it at all. So it kind of swings the opposite direction too hard because rolling 2d6 at a static number like that is actually really dumb. That's why heroic recovery is dumb.
Mm.
Um, but like what we need is some different mechanic, right? That would come in there. That would have been the way to do it if it took up multiple casts to do it,
Mm.
right? You could say
Mm-hmm.
like total eclipse could be like you do this and then this caster or another caster loses their spell cast that round,
Oh yeah, that's intriguing.
right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If no other spellcaster can afford to pay this cost, the spell automatically fails,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like that would be the kind of architecture you'd need to build in to actually accommodate these big spells,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
So, anyways, all right, let's talk endless spells, man, because we have drilled in on
Yeah.
this. Let's talk them endless spells.
Yeah.
So when we're talking endless spells in 3.0, what do you think? What's your take on them so far?
Yeah, I think that the majority of them are worth considering to some degree or another. That is that there's a smaller number, there's a minority of ones that I would rule out immediately, like Quicksilver Swords, which is ridiculously overcosted at 90 points for maybe 2 mortal wounds that ignores a ward save. I find that there's very few like that,
Yeah.
relatively. Yeah. So
Well, I mean, okay, I'll give you.
maybe maybe
Go
not
ahead,
very
keep going.
few.
I'll wait. I'll wait
I'll
to
say,
rebut.
yeah, yeah, that the majority, I find the majority, again, at least compelling, interesting, intriguing from the standpoint of worth consideration. When, imagining lots of different lists that folks are writing, I could see them considering the majority of these endless spells in these lists. Now, we're certainly seeing a smaller number than that list of that I would say is worth considering that are actually showing up.
Uh
And
huh.
so, Cogs, Life Swarm,
Yep.
Spell Portal,
Yep.
yeah. But yeah, I think maybe I have low expectations, but I think uh, they're pretty good on the whole.
Okay. Rebuttal.
Yes.
Cogs, Life Swarm,
Yeah.
Shackles,
Mm,
Portal,
mm,
Launchin, the
mm.
Soul Seeker. He's
Okay.
he's a dangler down here hanging on the end because he's actually really interesting now. He's the sleeper hit of the summer. Okay.
He's not showing up much yet, but I agree. Yeah, he was the one that on the show with Dan and Brendan. Like, yeah, we need to keep an eye on Liz because
He's so good now. I don't think people have cottoned to him. I used him in the
yeah.
Soul Blight list I played,
Mm,
and all he did was shuttle around the Vampire Lord. so that I could always be giving the +1
Oh,
attack wherever I needed, because it can
yeah,
move 18 inches, then you have to set up the model within 3. So
right.
he can kind of slingshot him about 20, 21 inches, ish around,
Yeah.
and that really
Uh,
gives him the bubble to kind of be where he needs.
he's 6 to cast. Okay.
Yeah, 6 to cast, quite reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
He's only like 55 points off the top of my head. That sounds right.
Something like that. Yeah.
And he can only shuttle wizards now.
Right.
And they have to be wholly within 3 of him to be shuttled in when they're placed and reset up.
Yeah. Do they take a mortal?
Yeah, they take 1 mortal wound after the
Yeah.
move is complete,
Yep.
which I kept saving. So there you go. Because I mean, if you have mortal wound protection, it's like, okay, who cares?
Sure.
And so like those are the endless spells, man. That's the list. The rest of them, fire them off the roof.
Okay. Horrorghast.
It's cute.
I mean, it's list. You have to build a list for it. But again, like that notion of, where they're at least worth consideration for, overall kind of in the big picture. Let's see. Geminids
How much is Horrorghast?
Horrorghast, I think, is 55 or 65.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
That range. Yeah. Purple Sun, no.
Nope.
Maelstrom, no.
Nope.
Palisade, very situational, I would say. I mean, there could be some uses for it, but to me, it would be in that camp with Horrorghast. If you have a unit you would really, really want to try to keep it alive, it's fairly cheap. I think it's 40 points. So as a little bit of mitigation against some range damage might be coming your way on a critical vulnerable unit, you might do that. Geminids is maybe a little too expensive right now. Not necessarily. I think it's 80. It is limited by the fact that it can only turn off command abilities prior to the next combat phase. So you're looking at Unleash Hell, or what else? I mean, Unleash Hell is the big one. All-out defense in the shooting phase.
Yep.
Things like that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, we're just talking about the generic endless spells here, not the army-specific ones, because we talked about the army-specific ones previously. Right. I do want to issue a correction. I had said Rune of Petrification was garbage. I would like to take that back. I think Rune of Petrification is actually really good, and I was sleeping on it. I didn't catch its wording. It's really strong. Anyways, I'm amazed I don't see more Lumineth players running it. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Now, with the generics.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with this list, Tyler, is you're going to go you're going to throw Horrorghast at me, and you're going to throw the Geminids at me. Like, those are going to be the two that you're going to argue about, right?
I got one more in mind.
Okay, what's your other one?
Suffocating Gravetide.
Get it out of here. Get your nonsense out of here.
Each unit.
I understand. They're not
Castles, Lumineth.
You still got to land that thing.
I know you have to land it.
And it's real big.
There are armies that have ways of getting a wizard up your opponent's face.
Yeah, I don't mean land it like cast it. I mean land it like it has to physically land somewhere. And it's this.
Sure. It is for each unit that is models it passed across, roll a number of dice. Yeah.
Like, it's so big. Sure, maybe it can go like, maybe in the perfect case where you get a wizard real close, then it goes like, wah, wah,
exactly,
in their castle.
It ends up in front of them. Yeah.
Like, okay, that's cool. Yeah. The problem is there's a lot of easier ways to just kind of sprinkle around D3 mortals in a lot of armies that don't cost an excessive amount of points. The problem with endless spells right now is that we're literally making the same mistake Magic the Gathering made in 1996. Okay.
So I can't get away from Magic talk with you.
Look, man, when these things have happened before, all of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again. I don't know what to tell you. Here's what happened. When like 4th edition, 5th edition Magic came out, they were really offended by powerful creatures. Okay? So they jacked the cost of creatures way up and knocked their efficacy way down. Meanwhile, the control spells, Necropotence, Counterspell, whatever, you can pick all your things, remained just mind-bogglingly cheap. Okay? And they did the exact same thing here. Right? They took all the damage spells that are like, maybe you do a mortal, maybe you do a D3 mortals, maybe you do those a couple times. Right? Maybe. Assuming they're not unbound, right?
Yeah.
Which most of them aren't that hard to unbind.
That's definitely, yeah. I think it's probably the number one issue, the point of umbrage that I would take, with the nature of these endless spells, is the fact that you can dispel them
Yeah.
in your opponent's hero phase where they cannot be recast. So you're playing the game of thinking about dispelling your own endless spell in your opponent's hero phase, which then takes away the double tap.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a big problem.
Yeah. I mean, there's just no way they're worth it. You don't get that damage out of them. First, most of them have a very short range,
Yeah.
right? Like you've got to have your wizards way up there. You've got to put them into like danger close position, and
A
then
lot of
you
them are a 6 set up in an 8-inch move.
right,
Yeah.
right, exactly, which is just not very far,
Right.
right? Because your wizard has to be kind of exposed because he's got to have the runway to actually like set this thing down and then
Yeah.
race it forward without it going over your own troops, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to be danger close to do it. Then you've got to actually cast it, right, and not have it unbound.
Right.
And then once that happens, you got to have it not get just dispelled at the top of your next turn to actually get the quote unquote double tap out of it, right? Now there are damaging exceptions, of course, like that, but those tend to be army specific. Warp Lightning Vortex coming out of KO. It's pretty worthless in actual Skaven, but it's great in KO. I do stand behind the Rune of Petrification because it's by the way, that rune is like a mini Warp Lightning Vortex. I don't know if you've noticed exactly how good that thing is. I was super wrong on it. The Terminato out of Night Haunt. Right,
That's
because
one
it has
that
a
I was
super
about
long
to look
range.
at. Yeah, Terminexus, which Dan was not keen on. I was doing my best to convince him otherwise. But yeah, I did see Terminexus make its way into a Night Hunt list at Flying Monkey this weekend.
Good choice. Whoever
Yeah.
you are, player, smart move. It's a good spell. Yeah. So like, but with the base ones, any of them that do damage, it's just like it's not even worth it because they basically doubled the cost for these. Ish. Again, I don't want to get lost in the a pedantic discussion, right? But your actual chances to get double out of it are very low, and even if you do, it's like, okay, a couple units took a D3 mortal wounds. That's usually what the end point of that is. Like, whoa. It's not nothing. It can matter, especially if you happen to roll it over some, utility 5 wound heroes.
Sure.
But it often doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what do 30 plague bearers care about that? Or 10 or 20 or 30 pinks care about that?
Sure.
Or. Right? There's a lot of examples in this game, like a lot. And I'm not even talking in like the powerhouse armies. I just mean like units that people have in most armies that are just like, okay, sure.
Right.
It's fine.
Yeah, I can see Bloodrack Viper, which did go up quite a bit. I think it was maybe like 55. I believe it's 95 now. Where, if you get the chance to double tap that against Ideneth, against the right army, certainly. But,
sure.
There are some ifs involved in that. I can't recall what it's cast on, maybe a 7 or minimum 6. But, yeah, I can't tell you one game, Vince, where, after more than a dozen games so far, where I've seen a double tap. I don't think it's happened. I've seen some battle reports where it happened with Emerald Lifeswarm and Rally to bring 20 Sentinels back over a game.
Emerald Lifeswarm, the trick is that it double taps immediately upon it showing up because it's got broken wording right now. It happens on summon.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because Emerald Lifeswarm specifically says when you summon it, and then it moves at the end of the movement phase. So it actually does it twice right when you summon it.
Oh, gotcha. Wow.
That's why everybody likes Emerald Lifeswarm right now, because it's acting like the inverse of old Warp Lightning, or of current Warp Lightning Vortex, I guess.
Right. Gross.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like, so, and by the way, if you fixed Emerald Lifeswarm so it should work how it should, which is, like every other endless spell where it works once per turn, then I think people would be like, okay. And you'd stop seeing it. Almost that quick, right? Because people would just get rid of it. The other advantage to Emerald Lifeswarm that does make it more valuable is that you can backboard it in your own space.
Yeah, right.
Right? It doesn't need to be way out there. Like, you can always use it in the middle of your lines. You don't need to have some wizard danger close to do it, right?
Yeah. Incentivize your opponent to potentially expose a caster who they want to then attempt to dispel it. Yeah, there's some good trade-off you can get out of it. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, my point is they have completely the wrong perception of the value of these things. They literally just said, oh, well, we made them twice as damaging, so we should make them twice as much now. No, wrong. Completely wrong. Base chip damage is not how you win a game. Like it's never been how you win a game.
Well, it's even less relevant now in 3.0, I would say, than it had been in 2.0, because we have so many more ways to heal, in particular,
Agreed.
individual models.
Yeah. Unless you're like unless the chip damage is so overwhelming that it becomes real damage,
Right.
Croaknado or something like that, right? Where we've gone beyond chip damage into just you're dropping nuclear bombs in the middle of their lines, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's always just a nice to have thing. What wins the game, what creates NPE, what is terrible about endless spells is stuff like cogs and portal and these kinds of things that are just completely game altering,
Mm.
right? Because
Hmm.
cogs is like, oh, I'll just double the amount of magic I have for 45 points. I mean, cogs is clearly the most bent endless spell in the game right now. There's no
Yeah.
justification for that being what it costs. They
Right.
need to, eventually Magic figured this out, by the way, that
Mm.
the control stuff should be more expensive
More.
and the
Hmm.
creatures should be cheaper because that's what the fun part is. We all got in
Hmm.
this together to go bang 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 and punch up and kill each other's people, right? And have cool fun fights. Like that's
Hmm.
Warhammer, right? And control crap that just shuts people's armies off should generally be more prohibitive. It should carry a higher cost to it. I mean, I don't think I don't think I'm saying something that revolutionary here.
No,
Right?
that
This
seems
feels like
reasonable.
common sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Uh,
absolutely. What do you think about shackles at 65 right now?
too good, but it's
Mm.
also quite limited. Like the problem with shackles is if you're the problem with shackles is you have to be a really good player to know how to use it correctly.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah.
And it's super easy to basically screw yourself with it. It's it's
Yeah.
it's the sharpest double-edged sword I've ever seen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Biggest oops in the spell.
yeah,
Absolutely. That's honestly why I didn't take it, because I was worried about screwing myself just doing something stupid that, yeah, would haunt me over the weekend. But yeah.
yeah. So to me, the answer here is simple. Like they need to. Most of what's wrong with the endless spells right now is honestly a points problem.
Mm,
Okay, like if you want a spell to cost 100 points, it should be cogs.
mm,
Or instead, we could just fix cogs. We could,
mm.
like Portal, you should just make prohibitively expensive because it's already been rewritten
Yeah.
basically to, the only way it's ever going to be rewritten down to one spell. I still think it's toxic as, but make it expensive, right?
Yeah.
You really want to put the Kairos's flame through and like insta kill one of my heroes, right? Just like 6 mortals and now there's a chaos spawn in your line. Deal with
Right.
that, right?
Right.
Because it's a twofer. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's both insta killing one of my heroes and potentially shutting down one of my shooting units,
Yeah.
right? Because that thing can just pop right into combat. And so you want that to be a thing? Fine, make Portal like 95 points, 100 points, whatever. Make it prohibitively expensive. So it has to be a
Right.
big part of your strat. With cogs, just rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
Rewrite it that the caster who summons it gets +1 spell. That's it.
Incidentally, I do believe that was what Facehammer chose to do with their house
Correct.
rules.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like the obviously reasonable thing to do with it.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, yeah,
Life
at
Swarm switch it
40.
so it only taps once per turn, as it should. So it is a true inverse of the damaging spells. That's all you need to
Mm,
do there. Shackles is toxic, but like I said, it might be so stupidly toxic to even you.
mm-hmm.
It might be like the chemical weapon of of AOS. Like one of the
Mm,
there's lots of reasons why we don't use those kinds of weapons in warfare anymore. Like
mm-hmm.
lots of very good reasons, but one of amongst those reasons is they also kill your own troops
Right. Right.
because the wind can change direction really easy and blow that
Yeah.
stuff back on you, right?
I just didn't trust my ability to see the future with shackles this
Right.
weekend, so it's
Yeah,
gone.
you put it in the wrong place and you're like, oh, now I can't run or charge. It's
Yep.
like, oh,
Yep.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, Portal, I mean, I get why some of, it's like it's enticing to want it to stay in the game, in some of the things that it opens up, but yeah, it's just we've had it for far too long, and it's been toxic for far too long, it just at least needs to go up a lot in points, or just go away. I'm pretty tired of it being in the game personally.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going with the magic stuff. All right.
Mm,
The problem with Spell Portal is not Spell Portal. The problem with Enlightened Tutor or Demonic Tutor or any of the tutor spells when they had came out
mm.
wasn't the tutor. Okay? It wasn't that you could fish the thing. All
What
right?
what what do these spells
What
do?
these spells did was they let you, like, were very cheap spells.
Yeah.
1, 2 mana, cheap spells. And what they would do is search through your deck for either any card or some card in particular, some type of card, whatever, put it in your hand.
Mm.
Okay? So they let you go through your whole 60 card deck, pull the one out you want. There's lots of
Yep.
different tutors in the history of Magic, right?
Mm.
They all kind of got this name named after the first one, which was Demonic Tutor.
Mm.
And the problem wasn't the tutor. The problem was the spell they went and got, because it, like, part of the balancing mechanic of Magic, the Gathering I'm talking about here, was the fact that your cards were randomized in your deck,
Mm.
right? And you couldn't just, like, have exactly the card you want when you wanted it, right?
Sure.
And these, you didn't go Demonic Tutor usually a forest or something, right? Like, you didn't go get an average card. You went and got the best thing you needed at that moment, the most powerful card in your deck that was going to make you win the game. It instantly puts you in the pole position of having your win con, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem with Portal is it's the same thing. I don't fear the Portal. I fear what Portal enables. If you have a bunch of average Magic, if that side of the bell curve didn't exist, right, then I wouldn't care. Like, you'd be portaling through a thing that gives me -1 to hit when you're normally out of range of it, and I'd be like, okay, cool,
Sure,
right, fine, great. Yep. Like, yeah, neat use of that spell, dog. Way to go, man. Good game. Like, good move, you. Right. The problem is that's not what gets portaled.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's the Tom meme.
Right. It's
with the unleashed swarm of spites.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Entire army.
Yeah. Because it's always that worst thing. Right. It's whatever the most broken thing you can get there is what's going to get shoved through that portal. Yeah. Right. So it takes the worst offenders and magnifies their bentness. Mm. That's the problem. It's a bentness enabler. That's why it's hard to balance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm more persuaded by your perspective on this. I do think some of the high level points that you made about.
Hold on, I want to answer a comment real quick. Autumn Lotus said, "Is Vince standing for random tables? Please God, yes. I miss that goofy nonsense. I always love random tables. Spike hates random tables, which is why I love them. Autumn Lotus. I love random tables and stuff. I play Skaven. Like, having the right amount of randomness in the game is fun. And generally Spike hates it, and so I like it. So there you go. Mm-hmm. That's my answer. So anyways,
there's another one here from Jordan. What do we think about the discrepancy between no bonuses and huge bonuses to cast, taking regular casters almost useless?
Yeah, well, that brings us to sort of one of our next points, right? Which we can because that was on our list, kind of the idea of spell balance, right, or that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are spell doms around, certainly. They're not as prevalent as I would think, because Croak got changed. I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to put a normative value on that, right?
Yeah.
And Nagash is balanced so expensively, right? And he's so limited in the armies he can show up in. Like, he's probably not the best pick for Soulblight, and OBR is kind of in a rough place. So, and he's like almost 1,000 points, right? So Nagash kind of balanced himself out of the game to a point.
Maybe he's the one. I'm still TBD on that. I'm getting increasingly concerned though. What I'm hearing and seeing. I mean, for example, with Nagash, he is probably right now the most unkillable model with Rend, if you're trying to do it with Rend.
Sure.
Because of a Vingorian Lord power pair or a Neferata power pair.
Sure.
Yeah, where of course Nephi turns off the reduction of Rend. You cannot reduce Rend, but you can still benefit from positive saves. And so you can easily get Nagash to a at least a 2-up, if not, well, pretty easily, honestly, a 1-up, rerolling once.
Right.
And then, of course, with Finest Hour moment, yeah, you get him to a 0. So, yeah, like I've heard Tales of Sigmar, they were talking about this. I've heard others talk about early experiences with Nagash, some of these power pairs where you just can't do anything to them.
Yeah, which I don't disagree with that. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's not potentially problematic. I'm saying it's a rather contained problem. Okay.
What do you mean by that?
He's only in 2 armies. And
Okay.
I don't know that he's the best choice in
Mm.
one of those 2 armies, and like the more powerful army right now.
Mm.
Right? Like, sure, you're right, that can happen, but is that worth almost 1,400 points
Mm.
to do that? Like, that's not a little bit of your army anymore.
Right.
That's a
right.
lot of your army. And by the
Yeah,
way,
Neff and him. Yeah.
and by the way, Neff is pretty fragile.
Mm.
Okay, like, to ranged output, Neff kind of folds pretty fast.
Certainly mortal wounds. Yeah.
Yeah. So at any rate,
Yeah.
that's what I think contains that. So let me answer the question directly that
Mm.
was asked. Are there too many bonuses? Yes.
Mm.
There you go.
Mhm.
Like, I think in general, if we're going to do the bonus to cast thing, okay, like if that's going to be a game element that we have, that +2 should kind of be where we stop.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's actually more and more +3 sneaking its way into the game.
Yep.
Krondus has it, the new dragon. You can get even in Night Hunt, like you can have multiple potential
Yeah.
+3 to casts.
Right. That was one thing that stood out. Yeah, those early test games against Night Hunt is that I thought they needed to lean into those endless spells and spell damage more because of the multiple bonuses to cast. Like
Right.
that, they were doing real work to me with multiple D3 mortal wound chip damage because multiple sources. Yeah.
Yep. Because they can actually reliably cast now between Breaknor's candles and the bonus candles you get or whatever.
Yeah.
So I just think +3 is so massively huge.
Mm.
If we're gonna push into some +3, boy, it should be rarefied, right? And come on things that are associatedly expensive, prohibitively expensive. Like, I don't mind. My point being, like, I don't mind Nagash having +3 to cast.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, fine. He's 1,000 points. He's the god of death. Like, okay, cool. He gets +3 to cast, right? But most other stuff should have like +1, +2, and that's about it, right? And the problem with it is, like I said, that the mathematical reliability of it is so huge, it changes your numbers, that it's problematic when it shows up at all.
Yeah. There's quite a few factions right now that are out there. Yeah, with more +2 or more in the game. Arcan is an interesting one with his Mystic Shield machine gun that he can do. I mean, what I've been hearing with OBR is that that's been one of the builds people have been doing where they just become really difficult to get through. Like Petrifex Elite all over again, level of durability.
Sure.
Because they're now, I think, ignoring -1 rend or reducing rend by 1, whichever the case is with the FAQ. But yeah.
I mean, Mystic Shield is on that side of the curve. It suddenly became like one of the best spells in the game. Your first spell you need to be figuring out how you're resolving in almost any army generically every round is Mystic Shield.
Mystic Shield, yeah.
Period. Like, it's the only reason I think about taking casters most of the time in a lot of my armies that have crappy casters. I'm like, well, I still want a shot at Mystic Shield.
Right.
Like, I'll take an Arcane Tome just to put Mystic Shield on someone.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah, that's getting a lot of use right now, Arcane Tome.
Sure. I'd rather, like, if I was playing Iron Jaws, I'd rather, like, I don't use the Shaman because I think the Shaman's junk. I'd rather just put an Arcane Tome on someone if I had to, and Mystic Shield rather than go the other way around. Right?
On a War Chanter, yeah.
Sure, or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good idea. Yeah.
Because I think the Chanter himself's dumb. I'd rather just take the item and roll at it and just roll hot. Like, maybe I get it, maybe I don't. Who cares? But I didn't have to waste a 120 point model on it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because if you're in that kind of like, I have a bunch of average casters. Okay.
Mm.
Cool. Like you'll get spells and it's fine. That's where magic plays well. That's
Mm,
where the thing will happen that we mentioned, where it's like, oops, all fails
sure.
at not reasonably tough numbers, but it's just that's statistics. Like you can have a 30%, 40%, and a 40% chance of failure. Sure, it's unlikely you'd fail all three of those, right? But it's not that far out. It's like within a standard deviation, you fail all three of those.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's
So,
talk about the let's talk about what we think are some standout
sure.
spells in the game.
Hmm.
These can be on War Scrolls or not, right? Like, what's the
Right.
best and worst? Let's do that, okay? What's the
Okay.
best and worst sort of spells in the game? And people in the chat, in the comments, hit us up. I want to know what you're thinking. What are those best and worst spells? What are your particular favorites that you think are really good that fall into these two categories? So either if you're watching this later, drop those down in the comments. I'm interested to see your list. If you're watching right now, throw it over in the chat. I'm going to be
Mm,
watching to see what people think. So Tyler, let's do a couple
sure.
bests. What do you
Yeah.
got as far as bests?
Give me a faction.
You pick the faction, man. You can do whatever you want. We can go across the
Let's
board.
go. Let's go. Let's think of a weird one. Slaves of Darkness. Maybe do it this way.
Okay.
Okay. Slaves of Darkness. We've got. So I'm thinking of the Cast Sorcerer Lord. Cast
Mm-hmm.
Sorcerer Lord, Demonic Power.
There
I'd
you
say
go.
that that's still pretty strong in the game right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cast Value of 6. Good range. I think it's wholly within 18. Obviously, you've got a lot of pairs that you can, a lot of choices. The most obvious being Archeon that you can tie together with that. We've talked a lot about Lumineth. I mean, Techless Searing Light, particularly through the spell portal, is 100% still a thing in the game. Playing these 96 Wound Daughters of Cain list, I'm terrified of that just hitting my entire army, particularly because Doc loves to castle.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's still really strong in the game. There's a couple.
Okay. All right. Very nice. Let's see. Oh, real quick here. Dante asked thoughts on the Toralon in 3.0. My answer is right now he's still very bad, but who
Mm,
cares? Because in like probably 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have a new scroll for him, and hopefully he'll be really good. I'm pulling for the Toralon. I want to see him be awesome.
yeah.
So there you go. I mean, we already mentioned Total Eclipse. We can't talk about it without this.
Mm,
Kairos' 6 mortal wound, create a chaos spawn fire, right?
yeah.
Is obviously in this discussion.
I would put Shield of Fate up there. I didn't realize how good
Oh
that
yeah, man.
is in
Shield of
the.
Fate is so good. Again, it's based on the number of Destiny dice you have, so you do have to be monitoring that. But
Yeah.
I also see most of those lists now take Glimpse the Future,
Mm,
right? So they can refill their Destiny dice pool. Like they don't actually care what they're rolling, right?
mm-hmm.
They're just using it to restock to keep one going back into the pool every round. That way they're
Yeah.
always getting the reroll saves. You just can't go below 4 and you lose the reroll saves
Yeah, I
because
think it's 4, right?
7 to 9 is an extra 4 up ward against spells. 4 to 6 left. Like these are cumulative, by the way.
Right.
If you have at least 4 to 6, you get reroll saves, and then 1 to 3 is
Real ones to save.
there. You go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Doc. I think we have to mention Mindrazor, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm,
it's an interesting example of one that's probably balanced correctly because it is
I
on
think
an 8 to
so.
cast, and
And the armies,
it's a
yeah.
hard number. The
And
army
the
doesn't
armies, exactly. Sorry.
doesn't have supercasters.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's well balanced in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, we were joking. We've been joking around. You and I may have a moderate difference of opinion about the state of Daughters of Cain. Whereas, as someone who's been playing it religiously for a little while here, I took a break with 3.0. I'm more inclined and biased to see all of the downsides of the army, and to see how the 15 snake bows and Marathi is doing a lot of heavy lifting, in my opinion, and keeping it up. But Marathi has a -1 rend right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you will go games where you will not get that spell off to turn that into a -2 rend and the -3 rend on the one attack tail, which often seems to roll 1 at some point and fail anyway. And yeah, I mean, and we've talked about what -1 rend means in the game right now. I mean,
Yep.
there's some counter examples to it, but yeah, I've had practice games where she goes in and she rolls fine, but they just save.
Sure.
And so anyway, that's probably a side conversation about sort of the counterbalancing factors of Daughters of Cain right now. But yeah, Mindracer, it's certainly like unbelievably powerful if it does go off. It like the differentiation of getting that off versus not. It's so impactful on a Daughters of Cain game.
Yep. Some other shout outs for me. Warp Gale / Dreaded Warp Gale out of Skaven.
Yeah.
Like I'll talk about Dreaded. Like, yes, it casts on a very high number. Again, like it's a tough cast. Okay, but you can get bonuses like that. The person who's casting Dreaded Warp Gale or Warp Gale can be pretty reliably at a +2 ish to cast. So that makes an 8 more achievable. And that's a 26-inch range D6 mortal wound in the Dreaded version spell that basically completely futzes with their movement in great ways. So I really like anything that's a D6 mortals. I generally, like that always stands out, right? Because you've got the chance to kill those utility heroes.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
I think, do we want to just say all teleports?
Sure.
Should we just like literally group all of those into like they're often picked, they're often at the top of the list, like all the teleports. So this is
Daughters of Cain again. You'll see Mirror Dance and a lot of lists. It gives you so much utility in the Galaxy Brain plays of setting up combos that you can do with Mirror Dance.
Yep.
Like one I'm hoping to get off maybe at some point this weekend. I think I told you about Cogs. I'm taking Cogs more potentially for the +1 charge. Holy with an 18, it's a pretty big range. So that's 24-inch setup, 6 setup, Holy with an 18 from that. In a game with a lot of range damage, I may have to keep the Life Takers off the board. I try to maybe Mirror Dance Marathi Kane somewhere on the board, maybe outside of Combine range. She then casts Cogs in a place where Life Takers then come in. Now they're at an 8 with a +1, from that +1 from Cogs. Anyway, like it opens up so many different combos that you can do with Mirror Dance.
Yeah, so this is like Mirror Dance, Mask of Darkness and Slaves, the various and sundry hands of Gork Mork, whatever, in the Orc and Goblin stuff. And on and on. Skitterleap in Skaven, right? Which is limited to only heroes, but obviously you've also got, again, the dreaded version of the thing coming out of the Deceiver, which, as we mentioned, lets you teleport to within 6 inches, which is so crazy good, right?
Yeah. Early on, Caleb Walters mentioned Evolve with Beast of Chaos. Definitely found that to be a great one. And
Devolve, like, and I've said this since I think the first time we saw this effect and this spell when the first version of this came out, which might have been like the first sort of incarnation of this. I don't remember timeline wise, but I remember one of the first times I sort of recognized its power was actually the Corn Priest spell.
Yeah,
that could do it, right? Or the Corn Priest prayer. Sorry, they could do it. But anyways, there's now Devolve is a great way to do this. It's especially potent in something like Zinch, who can reliably get it out there when you bring in the Bray Shaman and then a real caster steals it, as it were, right? And then does it reliably. But yeah, anytime you're making the enemy move, is potent, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, any with Seraphon that stand out? I mean, obviously there's Croak. We talked a lot about that over
Yeah, I mean, both of his spells are worth mentioning. They're both good, right? Ironically, the rest of the Seraphon stuff is like, that is to say, by that I mean their spell lores are like, okay.
That was my general impression. I remember looking at the book originally, but I haven't looked at it in so long. I think there was Stellar Tempest that had we talked early on about the 4-up, 3-up, 4-up potential with the new Swamp spell, Black Pit, that I believe Stellar Tempest is on a 5-up that they can do that. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Roll 1 dice for each model of the unit for each 5+, and that's got a range of 24. Yeah. So really great range. Yeah, cast value of 8.
Yeah, their lore is interesting because it's not bad, but it's also not great. It's kind of the way lores should probably be written, is my honest answer. Where like you've got reasonable choices. It's not like you're looking at it going, oh, there's nothing here I can pick. Again, it's not Slanesh, it's not the lore of the vampires, right? There are some like real stinker lores in this game where they just managed to basically fail 5 out of 6 of them and make them bad. So but they're fine. Again, they're not when held up against something like Croak's War Scroll spells, you're like, oh geez, well,
Sure.
okay, right. That's the problem. It's the comparison, right?
Right. It does feel, thinking about different spell lores, I would put Seraphon up, at least in terms of my interpretation of what you were saying earlier, in the range that you're looking for. I mean, wouldn't you say they're pretty, fairly reflective of that? Or do they feel a little too underwhelming? At least your
No,
take on.
I think there's some good stuff in there. Still, like Hand of Glory is good. Like there's stuff in there.
Yep.
They can bind endless spells and stuff, which is interesting. Like
Mm,
it has some interesting sort of big brain plays. Again, there's stuff,
right.
right? It's not a trash lore. That would
Mm,
be vastly overstating it, right?
mm.
Um, the Blades of Putrefaction would be another one I would still put up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's still a great spell. Like
Yeah.
Nurgle still has some good options in their spell lore, and that's one of them. Right?
Right.
It's almost
The,
funny because I almost feel like what we're coming to here is that there are sort of these almost like such
mm,
is the nature of the post-Renaissance mode of thinking that we want to categorize everything.
sure.
Our ancestors probably didn't think in the same way, but post Enlightenment, I guess this is what we do now.
Mm,
And, everything has to fit in a box. And I mentioned like teleport spells, but it occurs to me that we could also just factor in movement spells, right?
yeah.
Like when you take a battle mage, for example, out of Cities of Sigmar,
Mm.
the Gur battle mage is always the top pick,
Oh yeah, all day. Yeah,
right?
the +2
Plus two
run
to
and
run and plus
charge.
two to charge,
Yeah.
right? Just a bonus like that's so huge
Mm-hmm.
as to what it does statistically to your charge number, right?
Right.
Because again, charge is another one of those roll 2d6 at a static number and your odds get, not linearly worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different progression. And so like anything that's giving you like plus X to movement or plus X to run and charge,
Mm.
all that stuff is generally broadly fantastic, right?
Definitely. Yeah. What about Hallowheart or Cities of Sigmar in general is the one that stands out?
I
I'm
mean,
less
Hallowheart
familiar.
has some great spells. It really does. Um, they have a they have like a 4-up mortal wound kickback spell
Mm.
that's really strong. Especially if you have like a unit that is going to get attacked and that you're okay with sort of putting in the line. The sort of classic example that you would use for this would be something like Flagellance or Free Guild Guard
Mm.
or whatever, right? Because you just let the enemy kill themselves by attacking you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They also have a D6 heal spell in their lore, if
Yeah,
memory
Seer
serves.
Wounds, casting value of 6 within 18 inches. Yep.
Yep. Which is like the difference between a D3 heal spell and a D6 heal spell is pretty massive,
Mm.
especially in a city that wants to damage its own casters to get its bonus, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So it's it means a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh,
Sylvaneth, they certainly have some very attractive spells right now, and again that are especially turned on with
Number
spell portal.
one, make trees. Like
Yes.
that's you can almost like if
Yeah.
it says if the spell like obviously there's the generic, but then there's also like some other things that are around there that will either intentionally or incidentally make trees, like
Right.
Alariel's metamorphosis or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if it has a writer of create Sylvaneth Woods,
Mm.
because of the nature of how Sylvaneth Woods are right now, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Because it just means like poop poop poop. You just poop trees. Just and it's
We
so
haven't.
hilarious to me how you can just scatter trees all over the board and
Right.
suddenly big base things just can't fight anymore because it's like what are they doing? Where are they going to move? That's all
Yeah.
impassable stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's my number one issue with it. It's just the MP potential. We haven't mentioned Vengeful Skullroot, the endless spell. That certainly has more play now for that very reason, because you can put woods out in so many different places, individual trees in particular, and it can really turn on that spell. There is a potential to double tap it. It may or may not happen, but that's one of the few Vengeful Skull root that you can do the D6 mortal wounds if you're within, I think, an enemy within 3 inches. And I believe it's any enemy units that it crosses. I don't think it's limited to like one enemy unit D6 mortal wounds. I'll have to double check on that. But yeah, that's really good one. You mentioned Metamorphosis. It's even better now. It's on a 3-up, used to be on a 4-up. It's still got
Yep.
16-inch range, but that there's spell portal. That's a 34-inch threat range. That's tough to get away from, or potentially longer, depending on how you stagger the spell portal out. And then, yeah, the Tom meme of Unleash Swarm of Spites is incredible. If you can put that to the spell portal and hit a castle,
Yeah,
MSU
this is the
armies.
spell on the new guy, by the way, the War Singer. Is that the name?
Yeah, Warsong Revenant.
Warsong
Yeah,
Revenant. There you go. Yeah.
so 9-inch range. And so, yeah, again, I think another great example of why spell portal needs to go away, or something, it would be better for the game if you couldn't do this to a spell portal. But if you do 27-inch threat range or better, yeah, every unit that it touches, you roll the casting value. And Sylvaneth has so many ways, a couple of different ways to stack casting, or generally get high casting value now. Throne of Vines in particular is the main way. If you don't move each time you cast it, +2 to your cast rolls. And then usually you're going to see it in null root, where it's going to be 3d6, pick the highest two. And so you can get 13, 14. I got a 15 cast when I was testing this out. Every unit, 15 dice, 5-ups, mortal wound. It gets really bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I don't hate spells that just do a D3 mortal wounds. Okay? Like, if a spell is doing a D3 mortal wounds, in general, I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, in a lot of armies, I'm pretty happy to just have that and have the ability to snipe some damage around.
Yeah.
So I think of, like, in my Tempest Eye list, one of my casters has Strike of the Eagles, which is like a 30-inch range D3 mortal wounds.
Okay.
Okay. And I keep it in there because I'm like, yeah, it's super long range. Like 30 inches is a beautiful range on that, right? Pairs well with like the Venator. So they can both kind of go in on something, right? And maybe pick out a key target.
Yeah, that's great range.
So when we look at other spells that are more that have like the Warsong Revenant or something like that, right?
Right.
Now again, you've got to be a lot more danger close to get those off. But when you look at the power of those sort of PBAOEs or AOE type spells, anything that we would generally attach NATO to on the end, right?
Yeah.
There's those are still really, really threatening spells, and those are usually the damage ones that sort of make the cut.
Right.
Right.
When everybody's comment was early on this.
Sure.
With 2.0. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we would be remiss. I kept meaning to mention it and then didn't. But when we're talking about specific War Scroll spells, this is Ben had mentioned in the chat, but this is certainly on my mind too. Lycan Curse out of Belladama, out of Grandma Wolf.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Is just such an amazing spell. Again, D3 mortals with an amazing writer, where you turn the dead people into direwolves.
Yep.
Right. So then suddenly you've turned off their ability to unleash hell. There aren't that many spells in the game like that where they kill something and then make a model pop up in their lines.
Yeah.
But all instances of things that do that are ridiculously good.
Right now it's mostly wolves and chaos spawn.
Right. Right. but that's such a powerful ability, right? Like that is a crazy good spell. Grandma Werewolf she's strong. She's strong.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
Is there any other like War Scroll character specific ones that jump out at you? I mean, there's a lot of like generic stuff around there again that's in the middle area that you're like, hey, cool to have that. Neg 1 to wound is very popular, right? There's a lot of Daughters of Cain's a good example of this, right? Where there's a lot of War Scroll spells that are like Neg 1 to wound, and it's a good debuff, right?
Right.
Like it's great, it's highly impactful. People don't have a button they can just slam usually, unless they're on the Triumph to erase your penalty.
Yeah.
Right. So, or they're a hero, so they can go into their best day ever. So like Neg 1 to wound is generally highly valuable.
Got a lot of value out of Darkness of the Soul with the Cathlar when I was testing out Lumineth, and
Yeah.
that pairs especially well with Voice of the Mountains for the -2 bravery in your turn, -1 bravery in succeeding turns until your next hero phase. And if you got any other ways that you can reduce bravery, yeah, that can be impactful on turning off units. Yeah, generally, it's another great control spell. So yeah, I'm sure that still has value. There's some others like that, but Glorious Afflictions. I don't know if that's built into War Scroll. We talked about Nurgle. I think that's still a
Mhm.
great one. That's in that movement control. Half smooth characteristic, run and charge. Anything that does that, yeah, it's still really great.
Hand of Dust.
Hand of Dust. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's a classic.
Yeah. I hate that spell.
We mentioned the dreaded versions. Obviously, those all sit on the Vermin Lords scrolls, but
Mm,
like dreaded Skitterleap, dreaded Plague, dreaded Warp Gale, right? I mean, you can kind of go down the line, and they're
mm,
all basically good, right?
right.
Dreaded Death Frenzy on the Verminous uh,
Mm,
Vermin Lord.
mm-hmm.
Like they did a great job with the Vermin Lords of giving them like a unique scary. I mean, it's not. I guess it's not unique since it's just a better version of the general lore spell, but
Mm,
it is unique to them. I.e., they're the only ones who get the enhanced effect, and like all of
right.
those feel very strong, good, powerful, like scary. A
Yeah.
reason to play that Vermin Lord, right?
Yeah.
Which is this kind of the thing I mentioned earlier. I like it when a particularly expensive monster or uh, wizard has a
Mm,
cool, unique spell on them,
sure.
right? Where, okay, the way to get at that spell is you have to pay 300, 400, 500, 600 points,
Yeah.
right, to get access to that thing. It's not a thing you can just generically take in the
Mm,
lore, right?
mm-hmm.
Now, of course, this has a downside. We've already mentioned Kairos and his very super scary spell. But again, imagine if that was just a generic spell,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there, by the way, there are kind of generic versions that are close to it, but not exactly the same. He has kind of, again, the most horrible version of it.
Right. Usually it's D6.
Right, as opposed to just like six,
Yeah.
boom, you're dead.
Yeah.
I mean, as anybody who's ever run Durthu will tell you, the difference between a six and a D6 is a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but like I actually quite like it when again Grandma Werewolf, right, who has the Lycan
Mm,
Curse spell on there. I love that. That's a reason you want access to that cool thing. You've got to take her,
mm-hmm.
right? Raxia says, "Where are my Scryer and Molder Verminlords at, buddy?" I agree. We all want to see them. I bothers me to no end that there's no Scryer and no Molder Verminlord. It's
Mm.
stupid. Bad design originally, but that's okay, GW. You can make it up, fix it, put out 2 new Verminlords. Um, like, if we're talking War Scroll specific spells, as somebody just mentioned in the comments, who was that?
Mm.
Gumbercules? I don't know, something. Good old Glocken, man, and Fleshy Abundance, the +1 wound
Oh,
spell.
+1 wound. Yeah.
Yeah, classic,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's again one of those things that can be so highly impactful if it goes off. Now, again, it's on Glotkin, which has always been kind of a shame because he's very rarely been worth his points ever.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's a great individual spell.
Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about Metamorphosis. I think that's one that
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing get played in my practice games. I've used a few times. It can be situational, but if you got 2 monsters in your list, you can pop that off. Turn 1, get Ferocious Advance, get that extra point with Ferocious Advance to give you your 3 monsters. You can do a number of things in terms of playing that with battle tactic play. So yeah, and I think it's pretty easy cast value. It's like a 5,
Yeah, it's on
range
5.
of
Yeah.
12. Yeah.
Again, Metamorphosis. So this is the Gur specific realm spell that turns you into a monster. Just so we bring everybody along with us, because people might not be familiar. But
Yep.
it's it's one of those things that works really well if you've got the right hero or big hero not monster,
Mm.
i.e., Grey Seer on a Cauldron, or not on a Cauldron, sorry, on a Screaming Bell, or Hag Queen on a Cauldron, or Steam Tank Commander,
Mm-hmm.
right? By the way, my Steam Tank Commander absolutely brings along his Arcane Tome every time because like he's either Mystic Shielding himself or he's going to Metamorphosis himself, right?
Right.
Like if
Yep.
I think he's going to be able to go in and kill some battle line unit, I'm absolutely going to turn him into a monster so I can get that +1 for Broken Ranks, and know that like on the slapback in the next turn, I can just have my best day ever,
Yep.
right?
Mm.
And then give him, +1 to save, and like, okay, cool. He's probably just going to survive whatever you throw back at him, no issue. And I don't risk
Right.
that point. I don't risk giving up that point in the turn where he's a monster. So
Mm.
like, Metamorphosis really combines well with those hero not monsters that are survival capable.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Do you think? Okay, so maybe switching topics.
Yeah, sure. Hit me. What's next?
So Dispel Scroll, the ongoing debate about so some of the argument for, let's say, adding, we have universal way back. You and I had actually created a list of potential common magic items, which we sidelined for various reasons. Now we have this universal list of magic items.
Yep.
Flaming or Arcane Tome, etc.
Yep.
Should a Dispel Scroll be on that list?
No.
The argument for it is that, well, I think we've laid out a lot of good arguments for it, seemingly. There's spell doms, there's sort of this, you started out, there's this inverted nature. I think you were more in terms of the power level, but I think it's fair to say there's an inverted nature where you have this set of toms, doms, and subs.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot more subs than we do doms. They certainly are having a sizable impact, I would say, on the game. So yeah, a general artifact would curtail that to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Would it do it?
Tyler, would you like $100?
What are the conditions attached to the $100?
No, I'm going to give you $100. Would you like $100?
Sure.
Okay, well, I'm going to give $100 to everybody in the country. Okay? Is that $100 going to be as impactful to you as it is to Elon Musk?
No.
Okay, there's a difference in impact there, right? It's
Sure.
distributed inequitously.
Sure.
All right, because of the nature of the raw footing. The problem with a Dispel Scroll is that the spell doms get it too, Tyler.
Sure.
Okay? And then when they really don't want you, like, I know everybody wants the Dispel Scroll because all the people see when they see the Dispel Scroll is cool. Now my magic sub can shut off the dom at once a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Unless they're like Teclis, who says, like, I can't be unbound. Right? Or something like that. Right? Unless they're somebody who can just easily be outside of your range. Their spell range, because assuming that the scroll would still work within range, right?
Within 30, right.
And so they can just cast outside your range for the things they needed to, i.e. through spell portal cheating and so on, right? It doesn't actually do what you want it to do. It makes the magic potent armies more magic potent because now they can completely shut down the subs. Not only can they rely on their bonus to carry them most of the time, they can just be sure they've got it on lock the times they don't. And my proof of this is why one of the reasons that Host Arcanum is so unbelievably good is because they have a built-in turn 1, turn 3, and turn 5 Dispel Scroll.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they don't actually usually need that.
Sure.
They're often rolling with big bonuses, right, to shut you down. And by the way, if you do cast the spell, it only feeds their fate point engine. Right? So unless you're actually doing something that's going to be highly impactful to them, right? They're actually incentivized to just let it go.
Yeah.
Right? But they absolutely use it to shut down the one thing that's definitely going to be a problem for them.
Right.
And that's all they'll do now. You just gave them 2 in round 1. Like, now, congratulations. Now you'll never get a spell off against Siege. Right? Like, that's the problem. Okay?
Yeah, I can see that pushback with it.
Like, the instinct is good, right? The instinct is these spell doms are a problem. We need some way to control them, right? So, and a Dispel Scroll, like, it's the sort of, I'm not trying to be offensive here to anybody who wants spell scrolls, but it's the smoothest brain answer, right?
Yeah.
We don't need, like, if we're going to redistribute spell dom power, right? Like, if I'm treading around the like economic consequences of what I'm saying here, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But like if we're gonna redistribute the spell power, the answer isn't to just give everybody this tool. It's to guillotine the wealthy, right? Like we've got to take a hit. The people who are the spell doms need that problem fixed.
Yeah.
Right? That's the solution.
At some point, we're gonna have to just break down and do an economic show
Sure.
publicly.
The economics of AOS. The why does a horse cost like 3,000 D? Anyways, my point is that it's not the proper solution for the problem. Okay. Yeah. And the second problem is it creates a necessary arms race. Like I hope you enjoy every list ever having one less magic item. Because that's what that would be the immediate second order consequence of that.
I certainly agree with that. Yeah, 100%. If we have a Dispel Scroll as a universal artifact, it's going to be everywhere.
Right. Every list, you start with that, period. It's same as the old Dispel Scroll. Every list in Warhammer 8th, 7th, 6th, whatever, was 1975. Because you just wrote Dispel Scroll down on your list, and then you started building your army.
Yeah.
Right? So, no, it's a bad fix, and it shouldn't be there. Auto-take stuff shouldn't be in the game. Right? There should always be some kind of choice. Always some kind of trade-off. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the that thing doesn't cross that threshold. It becomes auto-take instantly. And it only empowers the worst actors.
You make good points. Yeah. It's certainly, as someone pointed out, it does at minimum feel like a band-aid solution, and potentially a very insufficient one at that. Yeah, I mean, my experience with this was playing Stormcast for a year, and I would certainly always take at least one Knight Incantor. You would sometimes see multiple Knight Incantors, but there's multiple buts that go along with that. I have to be paying whatever I was paying, 140 points at the time for that Knight Incantor. It wasn't the first artifact that I could take. If I could have just simply taken a Dispel Scroll as my first artifact, I may not have been taking that Knight Incantor, because that was certainly the main reason that she was in my list, was that Dispel Scroll. But there was a cost. Yeah. And, 280 points is a fair amount of points to pay at the time for 2 Dispel Scrolls. One thing I did find is that, there was some, you did mention the limitation of the 30-inch range. So, there was that. Like, I did have to put her in range, but we're operating on smaller boards now.
Sure.
So it's certainly easier. But...
And by the way, that's less problematic because, as you mentioned, you're effectively including a 140-point unit for the purpose of this thing.
Exactly.
You're not, it's just a much different effect when it's not the magic item.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
Like, as a simple game principle, if you told me, like, in the armies that are spell subs, okay, like, this is the proper way to redistribute the wealth, as it were, right? In the armies that are spell subs, that don't have bonuses to cast, or whatever, we're going to include more bonuses to unbind, but not cast, and often include characters that basically get a Dispel Scroll built in for free once a game, right? I'd be like, yeah, okay, great, I'm back on board.
Yeah.
Right? Because then...
You're raising the floor.
Yeah, because then all of a sudden the DOMs can't get a hold of it, and there's real counterplay there. Right? Like, I'm just generally against universal fixes to targeted problems.
Sure. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yeah. Okay. Well, it seemed like something that we had to discuss because, I do think it is a common thought that, most of us have. I've certainly had over the years that, it's very attractive.
Sure. Everybody, because, yes, it is very attractive to just think, what if we all had this thing without realizing that inflation is also a problem?
Right. So we had a couple more, how good should Magic be, and who are the real Magic factions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which order do you want to hit these? Maybe who are the real Magic factions?
Who are the real Magic factions? Yes. Who actually in 3.0 are the Magic factions?
Yeah.
Okay. Tzeentch, Obvi. slam
Yeah.
dunkathon,
They're
especially
they're
empowered by
number
cogs.
like I think they're hands down number one. And again, this is not even Archeon, but
Right.
to me, they're number one on the list.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they like. I mean, again, I'll say it just to be really clear with my opinion for everyone here.
Uh,
Please nerf cogs. Just fix it. Just fix it. In fact, I haven't said it yet this show. Hey, if you're watching right now and you also want to see cogs nerfed, hit the like button, like and subscribe. I haven't done any, but I haven't even asked that the whole show because I've been so focused on other things. But hey, if
like
you haven't hit like yet, hit that like button. If you also would like to see cogs nerfed, so there you go. Yeah, I mean, Tzeentch is right up there at the top, right? They've got to be near number one, if not the number one.
Raxius has made a point about, with the blue scribes, the rerolls to cast.
Yeah.
So that makes it difficult to even do a miscast.
Sure.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same, by the way, for all the like. When I played Soulblight, I played Virkos, and I'm like, oh, cool, miscasts aren't a thing for me.
Right.
Because I did roll 2 1s on a single cast, and I was like, no issues, reroll, good.
Yeah.
All right, and obviously I didn't roll 2 1s twice. It's doable, but it's highly unlikely.
Right.
So, yeah.
So number 2, Lumineth.
Yeah, Lumineth would be my next pick. I certainly think they fall into the fact that everybody and their brother is a wizard in the army, right?
Yeah.
Again, Cogs goes magically with that army. They have very potent and powerful spells that they want to be using between turning on all of their mortal wounds and on 5s and doubling the speed of a unit and putting up 5-up ward saves and technados and teleports and right, like, yeah, I mean, they have a lot of good spells, and they have a lot of casters, and they have pretty reasonable abilities to buff those casters, being either in Zytrek or with their Aether Quartz, right? Their pennies. So like they've just got lots of ways to do that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely Lumineth.
I find them the lists have still been quite varied, or reasonably varied with Lumineth lists I've been seeing so far. We're seeing some Fox spam a little bit show up, and like Joe Cryer I've seen running. I've been seeing some competitive folks running multiple Foxes, really leaning into the MPE. I haven't seen Lumineth take out tournaments yet that I know of. Could be wrong on that. I'm sure that some have gone 4-1. Still seeing some Teclis with Venari. I saw the other day a 2x10 Stone Guard with Teclis, which was really interesting in Metrica. Yeah, I think that was from an event last weekend or 2 weekends ago. I mean, what would be your sense of what do you think is the most competitive Lumineth build right now, or if there is one?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think one of the interesting things that's going on with Lumineth is they're actually quite varied.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a single build for them. I think there's probably like 4 or 5 interesting competitive builds. My problem with Lumineth is not that they're overpowered. They are an NPE machine. Like they do make and manufacture negative play experiences, but I don't think they're an overpowered army.
I generally agree. Yeah.
They're this weird finesse, fragile, complicated, ridiculous thing. You've got to cast 12 different spells in exactly the right order on all your different units, and they have this hour-long hero phase like Tzeentch. Right. They're just an awful army to play against, right? I mean, and don't get me wrong, they're cool enough as a force. They're just over-designed. Yeah. Like that book should have had a second pass where they just decomplexified it and just put more into the base capabilities of the units, basically.
Right. Yeah.
It's just too much. It's just too much.
It seems to have, I would probably, in my opinion, it has the most variance of any faction in terms of floor, particularly in terms of ceiling.
Sure.
Strong players with strong lists, I suspect, could get more out of that faction than any other faction in the game right now, and but the variance is quite wide in my experience playing with and against Lumineth over the last year. And I was just curious kind of where you think that is. Certainly think Teclis is still up there in terms of competitive builds, but
yeah agreed. I don't think he's required though.
Sure.
But I think he is really interesting. I think you can build Lumineth with him. I think you can build Lumineth without him, which is actually unusual for those god monsters, right?
Right.
Other
What's number
Magic
3?
factions,
Yeah.
like who are the real Magic factions? Uh, I honestly don't know if I put Seraphon in that list anymore. The lists that have been doing really well are mostly Thunder Lizard stuff.
Yeah, I know, man. I haven't seen that many lists yet that are really leaning into spells. I mean, part of that is Croak that because he has more risk, to tournament players, competitive players that looking to go 4-1-5-0, they may not that may be outside their risk calculus in relation to Croak. If something weird happens, they run up against a Jack Ballard,
Right.
and that story we heard from Jack about someone rolling triple sixes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And just boom, boom goes the Croaky.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that, like I said, Spike hates randomness, right? So
yeah,
immediately that just turned off a bunch of people.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, the other sort of people I would put in the Magic realm are probably Skaven. Skaven
Yeah.
have a ton of double casters. Like everybody in the army and their brother's a double caster. They have really potent and powerful spells, as we've mentioned across the board, whether it be
Right.
from their lore, from the Vermin Lords, from the lores,
Mm.
because more and more war power is technically in a separate lore. They have lots of bonuses to cast that they can spread
Mm.
around, whether it be standing near the gnaw holes or in their command traits and magic items, or
Mhm.
just on the model itself, like Thankful, who has his own built-in +2 and can easily go to 3 or 4 if you're using arcane
4.
terrain or whatever, right? Like
Right.
so there's the basic Gray Seer can chew Warp Zone and roll 3d6. There's
Mm.
just like they're a magic faction. They do a
Right.
lot with magic and can generally accomplish a decent amount with magic.
Yeah.
Ironically, outside like a lot of their other War Scroll spells are kind of
Mm.
okay. They're interesting. Like,
Mhm.
Warp Lightning is cool because you can multicast it and stuff. Not that you tend to have a bunch of Warlocks, but you can multicast it. It just
Mm.
has a kickback if you overcharge it. The Arch Warlock has a great spell that can do a whole bunch of damage, but if you mess it up, he takes D6 times D3 mortal wounds,
Oh, that's
so he
right.
just
Yeah.
explodes himself.
Yeah.
Um, the Thanquil's actual built-in spell is very bad unless you use it very carefully, in
Mm.
which case it can be really good, but like against a good player who actually is aware of what it is, you'll never get to use it.
Mm.
But it's
What's
interesting.
the what's
So
the
it's like a
summary?
3-inch range. You sum
Yeah.
up all of their attack profiles and then roll that many dice, and every 5 up or something like
Mm.
that is a mortal wound. It's something like that. I don't have the scroll right in front of me. So like for example, but it's within 3 inches.
Okay. Per model, or is it?
No, it's
You
one
know.
model.
Oh, one
You
model.
pick one
Okay.
model,
Pick
right?
one model.
So
Okay.
it's like you pick, and I think it has to be a hero.
Mm.
But like the point is, if you sit Thankful like 3 inches off the line, so he's kind of behind, so he can do his like spray you down on the charge trick,
Yeah.
and they bring a hero near him, or you or whatever, you end up piling towards a hero and then it trips to your hero phase or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah, against certain heroes that have like a lot of attacks and a lot of attack profiles, they can suddenly do quite a lot of damage to themselves,
Mhm.
right?
Hmm.
So it's really hard to use. Like I think most people would
Sure.
say it's crap. You know, the Gray Seer on Screaming Bell has a truly awful spell in Crack's Call, where
Mm.
you have to roll 2d6 and beat them. It's a short range, and you have to roll like you have to cast the spell.
Mhm.
Then you pick the unit within range, and you have to roll over their move value on 2d6, and you
Mm.
do mortal wounds equal to the amount you beat their move value by. Well,
Okay.
the problem is there's a lot of very fast units in the game, right? That move 10, 12,
Yeah.
14, and it's just like, okay, well, it also can't hurt flying units because it's
Mm.
like the ground opening up. So, I mean, there's just a lot of things that are de facto immune to that spell.
Right.
But anyways, I'm getting too deep down the Skaven rabbit hole. Yeah, Skaven are still a magic faction. Like I
Yeah,
think they
that
fall in
makes
there.
that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
So we obviously have, I mean, Nagash is sort of a
Mhm.
magic faction unto himself. Yeah.
Sure.
We're
If he's
also,
if he's in Soul Blight, it very much becomes a magic faction, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of what his own magical capabilities are, plus the other things you're going to do to support it. Like you mentioned Nephi's
Right.
spell, we've mentioned, Belladama's spell,
Yeah.
right?
Lore of the Death Mages still has some good choices.
Yeah.
Overwhelming Dread, I believe, with a minus, what is that? -1 to hit, -1 to
Hmm.
wound. One of those. Yeah,
Overwhelming dread is the -1 to hit. Yeah, that sounds right.
yeah, and
Yeah,
then there's another one.
it's
Yeah,
-1 to attack. That's generally two you
-1
take.
attack.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and then local tree rep. Obviously, I definitely do think Sylvaneth has been turned on in terms of Magic. With where Matthew Davies talked a lot about this. He's been running. My friend Scott is running the same list that he talked about on Rob's show, where Matt was really leaning into the range damage orientation, using the tree revs to pick up objectives where he can, kind of playing the long game. But generally, we've talked a lot about how with battle tactics, you need to be able to do targeted damage, point and click, and you can definitely do that with Six Bows, Alero Metamorphosis, Unleash Swarm of Spites from the Warsong Revenant, Cogs, Vengeful Skull Root, popping out from trees, doing D6 mortal wounds, and then in Spell Portal, of course, to chuck either Metamorphosis or the Unleash Swarm of Spites. So you can do quite a bit of range damage potentially with that kind of list. And
Yep.
I've been testing out Sylvaneth with some combo sort of combined arms list, where it's like Warsong Rev, it's Durthu with -3 and artifact, it's kind of little bit of everything, True Lord Ancient, but in Null Root, yeah, with the amazing artifact, the great command trait, and cogs. It is, as usual with a lot of these things, it's being really powered by cogs. It's not
Sure.
as abusive as Ancient Lumineth, but yeah.
The other ones that I would mention are the magic sub factions, where it's not the whole army, but there's a sub faction you can sort of step into to become very magical. Hollowheart in cities, Kabbalists and slaves to darkness.
I want to talk about Cabalist, because we still, you were repping Cabalist early on.
I stand behind
Tom
it.
and you. Yeah, and dude, I still haven't over the years. I haven't seen much play with Cabalist. I thought maybe now in 3.0 we might start seeing some of that.
Yeah, I hope we do. I think it's just interesting because the challenge with it is all of the slaves to darkness sub factions are interesting.
Yeah.
Right? There's not, like, Kabbalist is not head and shoulders better than the rest. Just spoilers, really good. Host of the Empty Throne, really good. Ravagers, really good. Kabbalists, really good. Right? Like, they're all.
Right.
So it's just kind of the flavor of what you want to do, right? And, to me, Kabbalist is really interesting. I think it works well with Be'lakor. So like I think it's quite potent in the fact that you can pretty easily get +1 to 3 to cast. Quite in a quite straightforward fashion. The fact that you can play with certain endless spells and get extra value out of them might make some of them actually worth it. But yeah, my answer would be if they fix endless spells, bring those points in a little bit, you might see more Kabbalists on the like damaging spells.
Right.
So,
nice.
General thought.
Yeah. Any others that come to mind? Let's see. Subfactions. I'm sure we've missed something. I mean, yeah, we talked about Soul Blight. Not really. Gitz is in a awkward spot, I would say, right now.
They're not a magic faction.
Yeah.
They have they have what's they have Scragrod or whatever. He's a decent enough caster. Like again, there's lots of this middle tier decent enough stuff. I really think that's the magic stuff. When we talk about magic sub factions, I'm not even sure I'd really count like Blood Gullet from the Ogres in there. Maybe not. I don't know. But I mean, that's the magic faction of Ogres. I just think that's the challenge with that is that's probably not the right way to build Ogres right now. Is kind of the challenge. You're sort of locked into some fundamental challenges there, in that you're relying on the foot Ogres, right, which have their own built-in problems. But I don't think it's bad. Again, I just wouldn't put it up in like this is the tippy top thing. I thought when I play my Ogres, I play them as Blood Gullet Ogres. So I mean,
yeah,
I don't know what to tell you. It's the one I like.
Right.
But that's because I don't run, really like monster trucks. Right?
Sure. And we already mentioned Nighthaunt. Now that you can get the candles on more than one unit, that does make them a little more intriguing than they used to be.
Yep.
And so kind of they got a little bump at least in the Magic game, particularly with I think we both think those Terminexes in particular being more intriguing.
Terminator, baby, I'm behind it. Yeah. I mean, as far as the worst Magic spells, it's all the people who just have like one poopy caster with no bonuses, right? Like there's a bunch of people like this, and they're around. It's just like, oh, here's your average caster with no bonuses. Okay, great. Thanks. I that kind of stuff. I just always find it to be. Never, just don't take the caster. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. So it's interesting, yeah, kind of leading this last question, how powerful should magic be? How good should magic be? I mean, we just went through these factions, and we didn't have, in my opinion, that long of a list of these factions that are really playing the magic game. So obviously we talked about Zinch, which, as you said, they're the magic faction. Duh. Lumineth, same thing. That's what they're all. That's largely, especially what they're about.
Yeah, because we're in the Techlian side of Lumineth right now, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. What else? Skaven.
Yep.
That makes sense. They seem to be in a pretty good spot with like. I don't really think of Skaven other than the example of the Nine Storm Friends, operating out of bounds with what they're
No,
doing.
again, Skaven are the most fair army
Oh
in Warhammer
God, I
right now.
walked into that one. Good Lord. Sorry, everybody. He got me.
Also, hit like if you agree that Skaven are the most fair army in Warhammer right now. There you go. Or if you don't, YouTube will know the difference. Just hit like either way. It'll know which one you voted for.
Yeah. But most of these factions, Daughters Kane, Fire Slayers, Ideneth, KO, even we said Seraphon, like Kroak has a little more of a balancing factor now that's toning him down. A lot of, in this edition, we're seeing more Thunder Lizard coalesced, not seeing as much of the other one, the teleporting, leaning into to magic. Even if we do, it's often a lot of skinks
Yep.
or sallies, not necessarily magic. And so, yeah, I do find that intriguing. Like after we've talked for about 2.5 hours.
Here's my ultimate summation of it.
Yeah.
Magic is in the best place it's ever been in AOS right now. Okay. That doesn't mean we don't have still road to go, though.
Sure, right.
Right. I mean, we're not anywhere near 6 dice skills, right? The reason that Rob's Twitter handle is what it is because that's what you needed to win 8th edition Warhammer. It was like, I'll throw 6 dice at the thing. Okay, boom, there, I win the game, right?
Right.
Like, we don't live in that world.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Total Eclipse, for as offensive as it is, you can play around it, right? You can absorb it now in the command point rich world.
Sure.
Right. Raxius, no, he was saying that's the non magic people, right? The people who either have no magic or average magic, or it just doesn't matter amount of magic.
Yeah, that's the majority. The vast majority.
I think what we need to do is like bring in these the offenders again. I go back to it. Like, I don't want to say haul out the guillotines and eat the rich, but like there's just certain casters that are and combos that are outside the bounds, and they should be reined in through either rewriting the war scroll or making the points more expensive or making the spell have more of a cost or right? Like, I'm the user. I have identified the problem. It's their job the UGW's job to identify the solution. Right. And I can provide you a list of 10 potential solutions, and all of them may be possible or may be the wrong answer. Right. But that's what I would go for. Because if you rein in those problem things, honestly, Magic's in a pretty great place. The smaller boards mean you're more often, it's harder to sit outside the spell range, right? You're more often actually getting that counterplay. If bonuses are reined in to where it's not, crazy bonuses, on several armies, then it's fine. Then it's a cool interplay back and forth. Maybe I've got +1 or +2 to unbind. Oh, cool! I've got my Rune Lord. He's +2 to unbind. He's not a caster. Like, that's a cool thing, right? That's a cool pocket dwarf you've got there, who can be a good answer. So again, +1, +2, I'm generally fine with. It's when we crawl above that the math gets wonky.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Cool. This has made me feel better about the state of Magic, actually, than I expected.
Hey, there we go. All right. Well, all of you out there who are watching, thank you so much. Apologize for the hotel show this week. Believe me, I apologize for the little, apparently there was a whine at the beginning. Very sorry about that, folks. I'm glad somebody said something and we got it fixed. But yeah, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back, normal show next week. I'll be back home, thank goodness. And as always, we appreciate you watching. We'll see